Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
If Molly had ever been told, even in a delusional dream, that she would choose such a dress for her wedding, she would have laughed. But now, standing in the fitting room and looking at the ruffles on the dress, she was sure it was just right. "Let's arrange a photo shoot for you," Kathy said excitedly. "Like you're all dirty Cinderella in a floor cloth, sitting in some back alley, this will be the first part of the photo shoot. And then I'll shoot you at the wedding, where you're all of yourself, such a queen, going to the groom in love. That would be the bomb. No one usually looks at wedding photos, and you'll show them to your grandchildren." Molly listened to Kathy and realized that there was no way to get rid of her crazy idea, so it was better to save her nerves and agree. Kathy was a stubborn and persistent girl. Probably, if she were just a friend, everything would be solved easier. Molly would just stop communicating with her. But what to do if this glamorous tank got you as a sister? Actually, they were only half-sisters. Kathy was her father's daughter from his first marriage. Molly treated her evenly, even with some sympathy, but she would hardly be friends with such a person. The girls were too different in character and upbringing. If it weren't for Daddy, Molly thought for the umpteenth time. If only Dad hadn't been so stubborn, I could have kept a cool sibling relationship. But Dad had gotten it into his head that his daughters had to be best friends. "Dad, we're very different from each other, and she's 10 years older than me. What do we have in common? We didn't even watch the same cartoons when we were kids. Molly, I've had this conversation about every few months or so. I don't count on my father's understanding. Kathy likes one thing and I like another. We can't even decide what movie to watch. She likes dresses and I like jeans. She likes Asian food, and I'm allergic to seafood. I mean, no, I'm nice to her, but we just have nothing to be friends about." Dad, as usual, remained adamant. "If you need a reason to be friends, you can consider blood relation a good reason. You're still young, Molly. You don't understand a lot of things." "Dad, are you sure?" The girl snorts. "Why do you think so?" "Because," nonchalantly answered the father, "because I'm older than you and I've seen a lot of things in my life, more than you can imagine. And I know all too well that partners, friends, buddies, all that is good, but how many of them will stay by your side in a difficult moment? It's good if it's one too, but family people won't let you down. One's own friend is one's own friend. And now I had to agree to a stupid photo shoot. Go early in the morning to some creepy second-hand store on the outskirts of town and try on the creepy rag Kathy had picked out. The dress, once white, had lost its color, probably 20 to 30 years ago. Now it looked dirty gray, and in some places there were yellow spots. These were located in the armpit area, and gray-brown, which had a place of honor on the straps and hem. The zipper on the back had obviously been replaced at some point. Otherwise, how else to explain the fact that the zipper was not white or even gray in the tone of the dress color? The zipper was scarlet, and from afar it could appear as a bloody scratch on the bride's back. "Vintage," proudly announced the saleswoman, showing Molly this amazing outfit. "Now such a thing is in trend. That's why we decided not to display it in the general hall. You know, customers are different. They grab it with dirty hands. They can even tear it carelessly, and things are rare and, not cheap." Molly nodded, not giving away her amazement at the sight of this masterpiece. "It's really exclusive," she said seriously. "I've never seen anything like it before." "I'll tell you more and you will not see," joyfully praised the saleswoman. "I know what you're thinking right now. You think I want to sell you a shabby old thing, cheap, for the price of a new thing, don't you? Don't answer that. I know that's what you're thinking. But if you try this thing on and compare it to any other similar item from any other store, you'll see the difference. You don't believe me? Then go to the fitting room. Molly, indignant at the saleswoman's insistence, did not object. Of course, this lady has a vested interest. She probably makes no salary, lives on a percentage of sales. There were no customers here, not a single one in half an hour. And who needs second-hand? Located in an industrial zone and squeezed between garages, which ingenious owners converted into a flea market. In 2 garages from here they sold potatoes, and in the next garage they sold fruit. The garage opposite the second was decorated with a huge sign, "Shoemaker's Workshop," and to the left of it a man dressed in a tracksuit, judging by his crimson nose and cheeks, drinking heavily, was seated on a low stool. Right in front of him were 2 wooden crates. On one of them were piled a huge pile of brooms for the bath. On the second crate were small bunches of flowers, the height of a woman's palm. The small red-orange flowers, which were abundant in every front garden, suggested that the merchant was probably there to replenish his stock. Walking through this improvised market, mostly pensioners and even women of indeterminate age with a bunch of children. What can I say? To work in such a place, and the enemy would not wish. Should we be surprised at the eagerness of the saleswoman? The fitting room was the far side of the garage, separated from the sales floor by a curtain on a rope. Molly pulled the curtain, leaving her alone with a rectangular mirror leaning against the wall. "If you want, I'll give you shoes," the saleswoman shouted from behind the curtain. "You'll be able to evaluate the whole image. Here, girl, take them." And from behind the curtain a woman's hand holding the shoes appeared from the side. The shoes were large in size, pointed toe, and without backs, but they did have heels, and even too high. "Thank you." Molly decided to be polite by all means, though she wanted to send this annoying person away. The dress was indeed impressive. Besides the color, the stains, the bright red zipper, it had a few other interesting features. First, the neckline, which was supposed to be asymmetrical, was symmetrical without measure. Because of this, any, even balletic posture, automatically began to seem skewed. Secondly, not only the bodice and hem, but also the waist of the dress were decorated with ruffles. The caterpillar effect. Molly laughed. "I always wondered what I would look like if I sat on chips and hamburgers and mayonnaise." Besides, the previous owner of this vintage luxury was clearly shorter than Molly, 10 pounds shorter, the hem of the skirt not reaching her ankles. In this, the girl thought, there's an upside to that too. Even in rainy weather, the hem in a puddle will not get dirty. "What's up? How's it going?" The sales girl called her again, and Molly resolutely pulled the curtain back into the hall. "How do you like me?" she asked and spun on the spot, spreading her arms apart. "Do I look good?" "Does it look good?" the saleswoman exclaimed. "You ask me, girl. It looks great on you. It's unbelievable. You look like a fairy tale princess. What a waist. I can't take my eyes off it. And the lace, the ruffles, so delicate, so delicate. How can you not go for it?" "No way." Molly caught the eye of the broom and flower merchant. The expression on the man's face was more eloquent than any words. He looked at the girl, slightly opened his mouth, in his gaze mixed bewilderment and pity. "It happens." That's what was written on his face in arched letters. For a second he squeezed his eyes shut and shook his head, as if to see if he had seen Molly in that outfit. "I'll take that dress." The girl smiled. "Just find me a bag of some kind." How nice to deal with such customers. The saleswoman blossomed. Now, when the intense desire to impose a purchase Replaced by the joy of the deal, she relaxed and spoke almost sincerely. And Molly suddenly noticed that the saleswoman was definitely not more than 30, and she was even very pretty. "When you came in, I immediately saw that you are a tasteful, understanding girl. I have a good eye. I've been working here for a while." The price to be paid for the purchase was unreasonably high. Molly realized that if you haggle, then surely you can get a significant discount. Who else, for God's sake, would need this work of sartorial art? But she didn't feel like haggling. She was already tired of this store, of this miserable neighborhood, where everything was as dull, as lightless, as gray as the wedding dress for which she had just paid a fabulous amount of money for such a rag. If it were possible to teleport from here, slap, and you are already in another place, preferably in her favorite coffee shop, where the cozy light, the tabletop of pink marble, the exquisite coffee aroma wafting over the cup, made of inconceivably fine porcelain. And then there is the sweet waitress Betty. She always smiles so genuinely at Molly. And Michael is a true wizard, a master of vanilla chocolate magic, always saving a few chocolate hearts with apricot filling. These are your favorites. I've set aside the best ones, and she'll make a caramel cheesecake sauce especially for her. That's where I'm going." The girl instantly decided as she left the store. The seller of flowers and brooms sympathetically smiled at her, and then took one of his polo wilted bouquets in his hands. "Here you go. This is for you. No money. You do not look that they wilted, the goods first grade. When you put them in water at home, they'll come to life." "Thank you," Molly mumbled, accepting the street vendor's gift. "I wish you a good trade." She squeezed between the makeshift stalls, hurrying to get to the corner where she had left the car, but, as luck would have it, it began to rain frequently, and the few market visitors hurried away, trying to hide from the damp, and the vendors rushed to cover the trays with plastic sheeting. Several times Molly ran into the same elderly woman who was walking from one stall to another, talking loudly on the phone. She had her head wrapped in a plastic bag, so she wasn't afraid of getting wet. But Molly, it seemed to her, was deliberately getting in the way and making it difficult to move. "You're everywhere, aren't you?" shouted the woman after another collision with the girl. "Why are you following me? What do you want?" "Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose." Almost crying, Molly replied. No one had ever raised her voice, and the rudeness of the pensioner frightened her. But not 10 pounds away, she could see the corner where the car was waiting, and that gave her strength. "Excuse me." Once again she repeated, rushing forward. "I'm so sorry." Something was shouted at her back, but Molly didn't stop to answer. "Hurry, get out of here." Already in the car, Molly noticed that she was clutching the wet bouquet in her hand. How disgusting! She irritably threw the flowers on the back seat. Nothing in just half an hour she would be in the warmth, among smiles and wonderful aromas, and could forget this nightmarish morning. The coffee shop was still empty at this hour. Usually the place began to fill up after noon, when the socialites, tired from last night's party, woke up and wanted to gossip. There were plenty of guests, but newcomers often appeared. Betty always recognized them by their tired grace, their lack of makeup, and their requests for plaid. The girls, they always looked like girls no matter how old they were moving around in their oversized sweaters, wrapped their palms around huge mugs of hot chocolate, and didn't forget to take selfies with their phones. The amazing thing is, these ladies always had some kind of party the night before, after which they needed to get some sleep. And there was never a morning where they had nothing to discuss. After 3:00 p.m., it was time for stylish, well-groomed business ladies. Even here, while eating delicate desserts, They never let go of their phones and tablets for a second. Business comes first. Michael is the best pastry chef in the coffee shop, Betty confided. Most businesswomen quickly become overweight. And you know why? They eat without distractions, so they pass it on. Here you ate a piece of cake, and you didn't taste it because you were distracted by an urgent call at the time. Is that a shame? Yes, it is. You have to order more. But then there's another call that you can't miss. So if you want to stay slim, don't let yourself be distracted while eating. In the evenings, the crowd here was mixed, and that was the busiest time. And early mornings, that was the time for Molly and a few other early birds. Today, however, Molly was running late. Has our princess shown up yet? Michael peeked out of the kitchen. Betty shook her head. No, I don't think she will. Don't you read the news? Michael grinned. The news? In the tone of an oracle, he said. Reading is bad for you. I'm not ready to soak up negative emotions and poison the food I cook with them. The waitress snorted. He's always like that. You never know if he's joking or serious. The bell on the door rang melodiously, and there was no time to explain. Molly, slightly drenched in rain, appeared on the doorstep of the coffee shop. Good morning. Betty smiled. You must be cold. Shall I bring you a blanket while your order is being prepared? Yes, please do. The girl hurried to her favorite spot. It was not a deep alcove in the wall with a beige-brown sofa covered with cushions. On the shelves stylized under stone ledges smiled with affectionate warmth, lamps, candles. On the sofa loved to lounge on the general favorite, a luxurious Persian cat. A couple of years ago, someone from the staff brought here a blue-eyed Persian kitten, red-brown in color. At that time, this institution was not as successful as it is now, but with the appearance of a fluffy kitty, the situation has changed. Visitors began to be attracted here like a magnet. The little one was named Praline and was allowed to walk around the hall whenever she wanted. She became the mascot of the coffee house, and a funny belief quickly spread among the guests. A good day awaits the one to whom the beautiful Praline will jump on the lap. This time the cat was not in its usual place. She had gone somewhere since last night. Betty explained sadly. She'll probably come back, maybe even pregnant. We hadn't sterilized her. She will. Molly said, Don't look so sad, Betty. Would you like me to take your mind off things for a while? My girlfriends and I decided to have a Cinderella-style photo shoot at our bachelorette party. You won't believe where I went to find the right dress. By the way, it's not very far from here. But Betty, you should have seen it. Can you believe it? There's garages and garages and garages and garages, and each one's been converted into a store. But store is a bit of a mouthful. The people there are wild, not people, but goblins. But I found the dress. In general, if you want a thrill, you don't need to watch horror movies anymore. Just go to those places. You won't regret it. You've never been there? No? Betty shrugged her shoulders and smiled crookedly. Why not? I've lived there since I was a kid. And my daddy has a store in one of those garages, too. He sells vegetables and fruit, and they're always the freshest and tastiest. Molly blinked helplessly. I should have said that. Who was pulling her tongue? I'm sorry, Betty. I didn't mean to. I'm used to other places, and I said it out of surprise. Oh, how could I do that? I'm sorry again. The waitress nodded dryly. Your order will be ready in a minute. Molly shook her head tiredly. What kind of day was this? Such a horrible day. Some grandmother had yelled at her. She'd gotten soaked in the rain, and now Betty had hurt her for nothing. Molly, not unlike many of her friends and even her half-sister, was brought up strictly. Kathy was always yelling at the driver in the cab, calling sales assistants stupid. And the pedicure master could easily get from her a poke with her foot for not evenly trimmed cuticle. That wasn't the case with Molly. She still remembered the fight her father had gotten her into when she, an 11-year-old Moshorka, in a fit of teenage rebellion, had once sassed her nanny. Rules of behavior were not invented by fools. They're there so people can interact without any silly scandals. Molly yawned. She hated lectures, and she found her father's calm demeanor intolerable. Just once he'd lost his temper, screamed, broken something, but Dad never lost his temper. And I am bored with life, without any silly scandals, daringly she answered, looking her father in the eye. He was not confused, did not tremble. Then scandalize with your girlfriends. But if a person works for you, it does not give you any right to humiliate him. My father said then. First of all, because only plebeians behave like that. A man from a decent society would never allow himself to stoop like that. Besides, you mustn't forget that the nanny can quit and get a job with another family the very next day. And we'll have to spend a lot of time before we find a decent replacement. Is your precious Kathy a common plebeian too? Molly asked in an innocent tone. I'm not prepared to discuss it. Father cut her off. But neither do I intend to repeat the same parenting mistakes I made with Kathy, and now you'd better apologize to your nanny. To better learn the lesson, the father for 2 weeks deprived Molly cash pocket money and forbade the use of credit cards. Subsequently, the girl was convinced many times that her father's teachings were not wasted. Molly finally made sure of it in his 17 years. When it was time for the first love, the guy she was in love with all through the school year invited her to a cafe. The girl couldn't remember herself from happiness, but all her love unknowingly evaporated when she saw how rude to the waitresses the young man. In the young waitress, the guy threw a plate because he thought there were frozen vegetables in the salad. Molly tasted the salad as well, and the vegetables were fresh. Apparently, the young man decided to impress in this way. The waitress was replaced, the salad was apologized for, but the matter did not end there. Her suitor had a new idea of fun. Now he was mocking the young man who served them juice. As soon as the waiter turned his back for a moment, the jolly boy knocked the glass to the floor. Why do you always put the glasses on the very edge of the table? He was indignant. Don't they teach you anything at all? Molly left before dinner was over. Dazed admirer ran after her all the way to the exit, and all persuaded to say what she did not like so much, but she would not answer him. To her father's question as to why she had returned so soon, Molly answered briefly, "He is a plebeian," and no further explanation was needed. But now she herself had behaved worse than any plebeian. Shame on her! The girl did not immediately realize that someone was staring at her, and therefore she even flinched when she saw the blue cat eyes watching her intently from under the table. "Sweet Candy, is that you? How you scared me!" Molly leaned over to the cat. "It's so good to have the kitty back. Maybe it's a sign that the rest of the day is going to turn out well? Come here, kitty cat. Here, kitty, 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 kitty." The cat ignored the guest's flirtations, wagged its tail lazily, and turned away. "Oh, come on. What happened? Didn't you recognize me?" Pralin didn't even turn her head in the girl's direction and walked leisurely past her toward the kitchen. For some reason, this arrogant feline indifference was offensive. "Your order." Betty placed a cup of coffee and a plate with an impressive piece of cheesecake on the table. Molly smiled, almost pleadingly, at the waitress. She was still terribly embarrassed about her rudeness, but the main thing was that she really felt good about Betty and didn't want to offend her. She touched the edge of her plate with her finger. "Did Michael make the sauce especially for me?" she said. She asked, just to make a point. Betty did not respond to her smile. "The chef's sauce is a separate charge, and it's priced accordingly. You'll probably have to save money now, but you don't have to pay for the coffee." "What?" Molly looked up at the still face Betty. "I don't understand." "I already apologized, didn't I?" The waitress allowed herself to smile with the tips of her lips. "Information gets into the news quickly, and we're goblins, but we're literate." "What information?" "Yeah, what are you talking about?" "Coffee's on the house." "Cold," repeated Betty. "Bon appetit." Praline followed the waitress, giving Molly a contemptuous look. What was Betty saying? "What kind of information? What kind of news?" Molly pulled out her phone, hoping to make sense of the overly complicated innuendo. "News, then." The screen flashed alarmingly with 28 missed calls. Yeah, of course she hadn't heard. She was always forgetting her phone in the car. Good thing she hadn't forgotten it now. The girl opened the full list of missed calls. There was only one number on it. "Dad, I left my phone in the car. I didn't hear anything." "Did something happen?" "I see." Dad sighed. "You still don't look at the news, Dad?" She was getting nervous. For some reason, everyone is always talking about the news. Isn't it hard to tell a human what happened? Dad didn't answer. "Dad, where are you?" "Can you hear me?" "Yes." Dad was speaking very clearly now, almost separating the syllables. "I can hear my daughter." "I'm sorry, Molly, but you're gonna have to go through this life without my support." "Yeah, what are you talking about?" Nervousness turned to panic, and the feeling grew stronger that this was all just a stupid prank. "Why are you always talking in riddles? What happened?" Everything happened. Dad exploded and Molly got it. No, it's not a prank. Her dad, always so poised, so reasonable, yelled into the phone, which had never happened before. "I don't have any more money. Do you realize that? I'm broke, and you're broke with me. Do you get it?" Finally, my father hung up the phone. Molly stared at the dim screen of her cell phone for a few seconds, then awkwardly rose from her seat. "The bill," she shouted. As if by magic, Betty appeared beside her. "Here you go." Molly threw a credit card on the table. "Just a minute." Betty smiled politely. "I apologize, but your card is blocked." Molly shook her head. "That's impossible." "Try again." The waitress repeated all the manipulations with the card. "I'm sorry, but your card is blocked." Molly slowly sank down on the couch. "So it's true?" She said to no one in particular. She searched all her pockets. There was some cash in one of them. "Here, take this. It will probably be enough, won't it?" Praline, following Betty everywhere, snorted. "Come here, kitty." Molly called to her pitifully. "Will you at least take pity on me?" But the cat defiantly turned away. "It seems we are no longer loved here," Molly whispered, and she didn't realize whether she was trying to make a joke or had accidentally voiced an unpleasant truth. Molly walked out of the coffee shop and headed for the car. Kathy was already flooding her sister with messages. Her cards, of course, had been blocked too, and she was now in a near hysterical state, sniping Molly's phone. "Come over here soon." She cried into the receiver. "Pay for my shopping. I'm at the checkout line at the mall. I've got tons of stuff, and none of my cards work." Well, who'd doubt it? Her sister's ability to spend all day at the mall was well known. "I'm sorry, Kathy," Molly interrupted her. "I can't help you right now. I have exactly the same story, and you have no conscience." The sister almost roared. There's a line of people here, all freaking out. And I'm standing here like a beggar. I'm ashamed. So give up shopping. The girl got angry. I don't have any money. Okay, bye. There was no doubt Kathy would call back, and then call back 10 or even 20 more times. Just put it on auto dial, hoping to harass the recipient so he'd eventually break down and pick up. But I didn't have time for that right now, and I'm getting married tomorrow. Molly suddenly remembered. The thought of the imminent wedding was crushing, and the girl burst into tears, burying her forehead into the steering wheel. Even this morning, life had been very different. In this life, Molly was the daughter of a more than well-to-do man, and she had everything she could ever want. A young, spoiled girl, fancy clothes, an expensive car, and the latest model phone, lots of girlfriends, traveling and partying. In this life, the future was as plain and simple as the change of seasons. She would marry James because their fathers are best friends and longtime business partners. When one of them had a son and the other a daughter, they decided that their children would marry as soon as they were in their 20s. From an early age, Molly knew she would become James' wife and did not resist it. Dad, smart, sensible as ever, explained to her that it was best for everyone. Of course, he said, I know that most people prefer to choose their own spouse, and that's not stupid when it comes to people living ordinary lives. Their children become grown up and independent early. They have to decide who to study for and whether to study at all. They barely out of high school start earning and learning to live on their earnings while trying to help their parents. They gain experiences that neither you nor James have. You grew up like rare flowers in a greenhouse. How are you supposed to know what kind of person you want in a family? You don't even know yourself yet. We've tried to raise you for each other, me and Father James. I can't promise you the euphoria of marriage, but I think you'll live peacefully. Besides, you won't have to worry about money. The wedding will be a good opportunity to merge our companies, and one of your heirs will take over the business in the future. Do you have any objections? What about love? Out of sheer stubbornness, the girl asked. The father shrugged his shoulders. Love the lottery. It's not wise to take risks when there's too much at stake. Business reputation, fortune. Finally, the physical, mental health of future children. If you want bad adventures so badly, you can always arrange it carefully. Brutal male with iron muscles can easily turn out to be weak and whiny in everyday life. Wouldn't it be easier to limit yourself to a few encounters with him and then go back to your reliable husband? The only thing you have to do is make sure your spouse doesn't find out. Then he won't let you in on the details of his adventures either. Show respect for each other, and everything will work out fine. Dad was always very rational. Molly nodded, realizing she had nothing to say and didn't want to. She liked James. She wasn't in love with him, of course, but she liked the sympathy even better. It filled her with peace and confidence. And now there was no more confidence or peace in the world. The image of James presented itself to her in her mind, full-figured, dark-haired, with a soft look and a shy smile. She'd never been particularly interested in what he did for a living, where he went, who his friends were. Their relationship was more like that of people living in a marriage of many quiet years. Returning from any shopping, Molly invariably brought a gift, and for the groom, congratulated on all holidays, gave not important, but pleasant little things. From each trip, she brought a souvenir for the groom. He politely thanked her and kissed her on the cheek. Every morning, the girl received a message wishing her a good day, and they always spent Valentine's Day together in some romantic place, and we'd never even had a real kiss. What's kissing? We were never alone with him. I wonder why. Molly suddenly thought, And this discovery turned out to be so wild, abnormal, that the girl could not stand it and laughed out loud. From the street, it must have looked strange. Behind the wheel of an expensive car sat a young girl with tears on her cheeks and laughed heartily. Betty, peering at Molly from the window of the coffee shop, shrugged. The rich have their quirks. She was roaring like a mad beluga, and now she was laughing. Praline meowed affirmatively. Kathy looked angrily at the stairs leading to the second floor. She managed to get out of the mall without too much loss. When her sister had disconnected her phone, making it impossible for her to reach her, Kathy didn't hesitate for a moment. After all, there were plenty of contacts in her phone. "James, hi, honey," she shouted as soon as her call was answered. "James, I've got a favor to ask of you. Help me out, future relative. I have something with my card. I can't pay for my shopping, and I've got a lot of stuff for the wedding. Please help me out. Just don't wire me any money, but come here yourself. I'm at the mall right now." The mall. James listened patiently and wrote down the address. "Okay, Kathy, I'll be there. Don't worry about a thing." He saw her, barely crossing the threshold of the mall. Kathy waved at him with countless packages. "I'm here, here," she shouted. For nothing really. There was no need to attract attention. It was impossible to miss the bright red coat anyway. James smiled, appreciating the extent of the shopping. "You're buying up the whole store, aren't you?" "Along with the warehouse? Not the whole store, just the stuff I liked." The girl said nonchalantly, "What can I do?" "I don't want to look pale at my only sister's wedding." He glanced again at the boxes and bags. "Is that why you bought 8 pairs of shoes and 24 evening gowns? Are you really going to wear them all at the same time?" He was teasing her, but his smile was so kind that it was impossible to take offense. Count, math genius. Kathy laughed. "You just don't understand anything about women. I couldn't decide which outfit I liked best, so I decided to think about it at home in peace. What can I count on you for? Here you go." James sighed and took out a bank card from his wallet. "I really don't know much about women." "You're right about that. But I know one thing for sure, you can't say no to anything." Kathy looked at him carefully and smiled broadly, though a little sadly. "Such happiness, Molly, will come to you," she said with a little regret and added more quietly, "Why? Why not me? You'll be lucky." James replied and cheerfully picked up the numerous purchases. "You'll get a fiancé that will make all your girlfriends jealous." "Come on." Kathy didn't move. "What about you?" She touched James' hand lightly. "Are you going to be jealous of the guy who gets me?" James was confused and took a step backward, bumped his back against one of the customers, mumbled a crumpled apology. "Yeah," he said with all his might, trying to keep his tone casual. "I'm a married man, so I'm not supposed to be jealous of other men's husbands, even if they are married to gorgeous women." "It pleases me that you think I am a gorgeous woman," said Kathy, still in the same special quiet voice, which for some reason on the skin ran goosebumps. "Yes, of course I do. Shall we go? You probably have a lot of important things to do." James hurried off. Cosmetology and manicures, and of course, picking out an outfit for tomorrow. "Can you give me a ride?" Kathy asked him. "I won't even be able to pay for a cab until I get my card sorted out. This is so stupid." Kathy lived in a huge studio with panoramic windows. The view was amazing. The river and forest on the other side. How beautiful it must be here in winter. "There's a second floor here, too," said the girl, letting James into the hallway. "There used to be a communal house here, and before that, The house belonged to some aristocrat long ago under the Tsar. When I grew up, Dad bought 2 apartments for me, one right above the other. So I live in a 2-story palace all by myself. Isn't it boring? James asked. You don't even have a dog. Kathy laughed, kicked off her shoes, and strode across the room with a dancing step. I'm not often home, she said. The dog would probably die of homesickness. I see. James stomped awkwardly in place. Where should I put your bags? I'll go. I don't want to take you away from your business. Kathy waved her hand. Throw them somewhere, anywhere, and they won't get away from me. I'm not letting you go without a cup of tea. Oh no, thanks. No objections. I've got to do something to thank you. And my tea is very special. I bet you've never tasted anything like it. Really? James smiled. Shall we test it? Kathy winked. A small table on wheels, beautifully set, with 2 cups and a vase of candy, Kathy stopped at the window between 2 armchairs. I like to sit here, she said simply. Both in the evening and in the morning, really? I like coffee in the morning. I have an original predilection, don't I? Kathy laughed. Well, try it already, and don't you dare say it doesn't taste good. What is it? James blinked as he took a sip from the cup. The flavor of the drink was strange, not at all like tea. It was more like something between sweet baby fizz and herbal infusion. Kathy genuinely enjoyed the effect. My personal recipe, a tea with white rose petals, orange zest, chocolate shavings, and a pinch of pepper. Pepper? James swallowed hard and took another sip. Yeah, she is beautiful. James thought suddenly. Why didn't I notice it before? I'm so embarrassed. She said quietly. Did Molly tell you everything? Did she? No. James shook his head. She didn't. What difference does it make? Yeah, it probably doesn't. You're probably right. Kathy slowly twirled a strand of hair around her finger. There was something mesmerizing about the motion. Would you like some more tea? She offered. I'll get some. James suddenly felt a little dizzy. For some reason, he wanted to get up and leave immediately. But suddenly Kathy's face, her soft, plump lips, were right next to him. How had it happened? She'd just been sitting in the chair. So you know everything and you're going to marry her after all? She whispered, almost touching his face. Now she was sitting on the floor, hugging his knees. You'll be lucky, Kathy. James muttered again. The girl remained silent. You'll be lucky. James gently stroked Kathy's soft golden hair. Her bright blue eyes seemed huge and looked so helpless. Meanwhile, Molly dialed her sister's number for the 3rd time. Where had she gone? Kathy always kept her cell phone handy and never turned it off. Yes, but it was too late to leave. The intercom rang, announcing that all avenues of escape were now cut off. It's Molly. Kathy whispered. Okay, go to the 2nd floor and sit there like a mouse. Quiet as a mouse. Quiet as a mouse, you understand. Molly stood on the doorstep, crumpling a bag with something soft inside. The rustling sound was so loud that Kathy covered her ears with her hands. Stop it, she shouted. Don't rustle. Molly, without waiting for an invitation, went into the kitchen. Well, that's better. At least she stopped rustling. Do you have guests? Asked the girl, noticing the 2nd cup on the table. Kathy smiled conspiratorially at her sister. There were guests, and I didn't have time to put the dishes away, and I haven't made the bed after the guests. Even the sheet didn't overpower. You know how I like to get rid of stress, don't you? What about you? Called James yet? Molly looked at Kathy absently, as if she hadn't immediately remembered who James was, and shook her head slowly. "No, I haven't, and he hasn't called me. I don't even know if there's going to be a wedding now. Maybe now. Well, after what happened, he'll change his mind about marrying me. Would that make you sad?" Kathy asked. "Imagine your fiancé calling you now and telling you there's no wedding. Would you be upset?" James, who was lurking on the second floor, turned to listen, but for a long time there was complete silence downstairs. Had they fallen asleep? "Are you going to be upset or not?" Kathy asked again. Molly shrugged. "I'll be upset. I guess I'll be upset. I'm so used to the idea of us getting married that I can't imagine anyone else. But that's not what I'm thinking about right now. I'm trying to figure out how to move on. I guess I should get a job, but I don't know what to do. I've never worked before. I don't even know what it's like. And my dad, what's he gonna do? I'm afraid he'll start drinking, like from the shock. Maybe we should tell Mom. Why don't she come and stay here till Daddy gets over all this trouble?" No, wait. You're thinking about the wrong thing." Her sister interrupted her. "If you marry your James tomorrow, you won't have to think about any work. And then you can help your father, and nothing will change for you. And if I don't marry him?" Molly replied sullenly, "Will there be a wedding at all? You know, this is so stupid. Today at 4 o'clock I have to go to the dressmaker to pick up the dress and pay for it, of course, and I have nothing to pay with. And now I don't even know if I need this dress." "What? You have no money at all?" Kathy gasped. "Not even any cash left? That can't be true. No way. I spent the last of my cash on something. I can't remember what." Molly lost her forehead. Her mind was jumbled. "I remember. I paid for the coffee at the coffee shop before my dad called me. So now the only dress I can afford is this one here." She rustled the bag again, which contained a hideous dress from second-hand. James grinned bitterly. It was still a shame that Molly had come to her sister's house instead of his. It would have been normal for her to go to her fiancé first, to seek support from him. Would he have refused her? Isn't that what people do? And himself. Immediately he objected to himself. He knew what had happened and had not even called her. He thought she would call him herself. He didn't want to pry into her soul. But is that the way to put the question when you know that someone close to you is in trouble? "I'm an asshole." The conclusion he came to was disappointing. It turned out that he and Molly were not close people. Close people do not behave like that. A long time ago in high school, he had fallen head over heels in love with his neighbor. The girl's parents were not very sociable people, and for 6 months in a new neighborhood, they never met anyone. Their daughter hadn't made any friends either, and it seemed she'd never even talked to anyone. James had no idea how to approach this arrogant little thing, but chance came to the rescue. They had met at a dog-walking area, and the Spitz, which the beautiful neighbor was leading on a thin leash, suddenly broke free and ran away. James rushed after it. The puppy wasn't used to physical exertion, so it took a couple of minutes to catch him. "Hold your pet." The girl nodded, then pulled a small notebook out of her pocket and quickly wrote a few words in it. "Thank you for helping catch Klaus," he read as the girl handed him the notepad. "I'm mute. My name is Lisa." Soon he and Lisa became firm friends. It turned out that the girl's parents were mute, too, and that was why, not because of arrogance as he had thought at first, they didn't socialize with anyone. Now, right after school, he and Lisa would rush to the park and sit on a bench for long hours, exchanging notes. And then one day it was over. "Tomorrow my parents and I are leaving here forever," she wrote in her notebook. "Tomorrow? Where are you going and why?" "To my grandmother's." Lisa wrote, "Daddy says it's the right thing to do." That was all she could get out of her. Now, after all these years, James remembered his mute girlfriend and regretfully realized that even he knew more about her than he did about his fiancée. And his relationship with Lisa had been much more intimate and trusting than with Molly. Congratulations, you idiot. You realized it on the eve of your own wedding. He walked downstairs to the girls at the very moment Molly, wearing her Cinderella dress, was slowly turning around in front of her sister. "Do you like it?" she asked Kathy. "I don't think I've ever seen anything worse in my life, much less worn. It's the most beautiful dress I've ever seen." James said loud and clear, "And you are beautiful, and always will be." In any dress. Molly turned sharply toward him. "James, when you came in, I didn't hear anything?" "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to scare you. I've been here the whole time, just on the second floor. And you and me." He walked over to Molly and took her hand. "We have a lot to talk about. I just realized that we don't know each other at all. I'm sorry. It's all my fault." "What do you mean?" Kathy smiled wryly. For some reason, her face was completely distorted from that skewed, evil smile, which was more like a grin. Such a beautiful, gentle face, it suddenly turned into an ugly mask. "We're in the middle of a revelation," she sang softly. "That's good. Before the wedding, it is better to know everything about each other. Oh, you two are so good. James, dear, I propose to begin by explaining to our little Molly what you are doing here and why you were hiding from her on the second floor. Will you?" Molly, not understanding, looked at her sister, then at her fiancé. He stood with his eyes downcast. "Lia, is there something I don't know?" she asked. "What is she talking about? What are you doing with her?" James took her by the shoulders and turned her around to face him. "I cheated on you, Molly. At least I think I did. I don't remember the details, though. And no, I never thought about it before. I don't know how it happened. He started hitting on me." I shrieked, Kathy. "No, he didn't," James replied calmly. "Kathy suggested that I try some special tea. It made me dizzy and drowsy and weak." Yeah. Kathy snorted. "Weakness, drowsiness. Listen to him. He will now tell how I seduced him myself, deprived him of his innocence. Poor thing." "Kathy?" Ignoring the comments, James continued. "She was very upset about about what happened to your father. She was sitting here on the floor with her head in my lap. I don't remember the rest of it. I woke up naked with her next to me." Molly slowly, like a wind-up doll, turned to face Kathy. "After all, you are my sister," she said quietly. "How could you? And why would you do that?" "Sister?" She laughed shrilly and turned away to the window. "You've always been a bit naive, Molly," Kathy said without turning around. "No, it's not even naive. You've always been a complete idiot. Look at you and me. What kind of sisters are we? We have nothing in common, not a single trait, and my mother. Have you ever seen her? Ever wonder where she is? Did our father ever think of her?" Kathy turned to Molly and James. Slender, tall, golden-haired, but so alien. "I am not your father's daughter," she said, raising her voice slightly. "I'm his mistress." Molly didn't answer. Just stared at Kathy with widened eyes, tiny beads of sweat beading on her forehead. She could feel it. "Kathy," James began firmly, "calm down and stop talking nonsense. Don't you realize what you're saying?" "Don't know what I'm saying," she said mockingly. "Honey, I haven't even told you half of it yet. How about the fact that I'm not a stranger to your worthy parent either?" Are you really my sister? James smiled. Or maybe a mother or grandmother, just to be clear? I'm neither, kid. The blonde didn't hesitate. I've been sleeping with your daddy for a long time. And now let's think. Molly, how come your father, a wealthy, serious man, went bankrupt in one day? Use your brain, dummy. These things never happen in 1 second. Someone has been digging under him for months, maybe even years, gathering and sorting information, finding weaknesses. And that someone needed a spy in the enemy camp. Someone with access to everything, to all the secrets. Someone trusted. Who do you think it could be? Think, Molly. A person who's trusted, who can access anything if he wants to, and no one would suspect him. Are you saying it's you? James laughed. That's bloody nonsense. And you know why? There's no reason for my father to pull a scam like that. It's not much of a scam. Kathy pulled the hem of her silk robe tighter and sat down in the low armchair. It's not fraud, my little friends. It's revenge. Many years ago, a man was walking through the winter woods, knee-deep in deep snow. He was clearly not dressed for walking. A light jacket would have withstood at most a light, illuminating frost, but not -25 with wind. Jeans and city sneakers, too, were not suitable for wading through the thicket. The man was dragging a kind of sled made of interconnected power branches. The branches were covered with a sweater and a t-shirt, and on this improvised mattress lay a man, his face pale with pain. His eyes were closed, but the man was awake. From time to time he opened his eyes, groaned softly, and moaned in pain. Nothing. He was encouraged by the one in front. I can smell smoke already. I can smell it from here. We'll soon reach the village, and there someone will give us a lift to the town. Just be patient, just a little longer. Can you feel your legs? I feel. The other one. I wish I didn't feel anything. It hurts like hell. The right one's still okay, but the left one feels like a train ran over it. Be patient. The first one repeated stubbornly and looked glumly ahead. He didn't smell any smoke, so lied to support the wounded. It was not clear where this forest ended, or whether it would end at all. Maybe they were going in circles. He clenched his teeth tighter and tried to pick up his pace. His blonde hair, visible from beneath his hat, was already crusted with ice. His eyelashes were white with frost. His heart grew more and more stiff, an irrational, almost childlike fear. That they would wander through the enchanted forest for the rest of eternity. How does it say in fairy tales? The Leshy, if he wants to amuse himself, will make travelers wander more often, will not let them find the way home. He walked minute by minute, falling asleep on the way from terrible fatigue. Don't sleep, don't sleep. You can't sleep now, you'll fall asleep and won't wake up. In order not to fall asleep, he counted his own steps. 1, 2, bad head, 3, watch your step. The wounded man moved on his spruce sled, and again he gave a long sigh. 4, 5, let's go for a walk. We can't get out, moaned the other one. 6, frost can't eat us. 7, we live to please everyone. We'll both be lost here. Why don't you leave me? Hey, hate. We'll survive without asking anyone. If we both die, who'll raise the children? You, James, don't leave me. Nonsense. We won't die. No forest goes on forever, and they don't go in circles. They haven't made a single turn anywhere. It's all right. The forests here, he remembered from the map, are small, and any one of them could be traversed. There's a village up ahead, exactly 100 miles away. He even imagined a few houses under snowy roofs, smoke billowing so there's people around. People are sitting in the house. Some of them are warming themselves by the stove in felt boots. Some of them are reading a book or maybe knitting socks. And on the windows are curtains in flowers or in peas. It doesn't matter. You can have polka dots. There are patterns on the windows. The frost did it. It's beautiful. What else is there? Oh, pies, of course, baked in the oven. Their crust is ruddy, crispy when you bite into it, and inside the pie it's soft, and the filling is delicious. Potatoes in one pie, potatoes in the other. Let it be egg and onion. And the third one should be sweet. With jam, let there be a third one. Suddenly he stopped and sniffed. No, this time he was not dreaming. The smell of smoke, of warmth, tickled his nostrils pleasantly. So the village was very close. Hold on. He shouted to his comrade, and as fast as he could, he strode forward. After 100 miles, he saw a wide gap between the trees. In front of him in the lowlands, the whole village lay like a palm of his hand. Hey, he shouted at the top of his lungs. People, help! No one answered him, but somewhere in the yard, a small dog yapped a couple of times, and then it went silent. People! The man shouted again. His voice was clearly desperate, but then a heavy door in one of the houses creaked open. Why are you yelling? Do you need help? What is it? How in God's name? Did a truck drive over it? The man in the house they were in had helped to carry the wounded man into the house and set him down on a hard wooden bench. Now he was examining the wounded man's legs, clucking his tongue disapprovingly and muttering something to himself. When he had finished, he shook his head and wrapped the groaning man in a fur blanket. It was an accident, explained the one who was well. It's a blizzard at night. The road is slippery. You can't see anything. We would have stopped to wait it out, but we were in a hurry. His son is waiting at home. My daughter is waiting for me. So we overturned. The car caught fire, but I'm okay. My arms and legs are intact. My rib only hurts, but it's from a bruise. But my partner, you can see for yourself. I can see. I'm not blind. Answered the man. We need to go to town, to the hospital, or he'll die. Help me. We'll carry him to the car together. He came to his senses only in the morning and was surprised to find himself in a white hospital room. His comrade was sitting motionless on the next bed, leaning back on the pillow. Was he dozing? No, not likely. He opened his eyes immediately. Are you all right? William? I'm fine. I'm fine. Are you okay? Should I get the nurse? No, are you okay? I'm fine. You've had surgery, you'll live, and in time you'll learn to walk again. You had 4 fractures. They had to put you back together. But you got it together, right? They did. The patient licked his parched lips. So we had Christmas. Why were you in such a hurry? Oh, I'm thirsty. William, it's after the anesthesia. Wait, I'll be right back. The one called William took glasses and a plastic bottle of water from the nightstand. I'll get you some water. Can you stand up? No? Then let's do it this way. He put one hand under his friend's neck, and with the other he brought the glass to his lips. Drink, Charles, but don't hurry, you'll choke. Charles drank greedily in small gulps, keeping his eyes on William. You are, aren't you? He said, withdrawing his hand from the glass. You saved my life. You could have left me there, and that would have been it. All the debts, all the bills, everything would have stayed there. But you didn't. I don't have any bills to settle with you. William replied sharply. No debts either. Not you, not me. And Nancy? The name hung in the air and seemed to heat him up. Nancy. They both liked her with her snub nose, her freckles and her tangled black curls. They'd met at a frat party. Then the whole dorm was buzzing, of course. The session was closing. It was there, in the kaleidoscope of ruddy laughing faces, that he first noticed her. Her stubborn black eyes locked into his, never letting go for a second, holding him fast. William stepped closer to her, short, thin as a cane, wearing someone else's leather jacket. "Who are you?" "Nancy." A cigarette between cheekily smiling lips, black curls ringing her eyes. "Oh, you bastard," someone behind him said quietly. "He's got it in for the guy. That's it. Lights out. She's made up her own mind." William said quietly to Charles in the room, "You loved her more than I did." It was fate. A shadow ran across William's face. Whether it was love or just the madness of puberty and all the vagaries of puberty, he didn't get over it. He didn't get over it, but then she caught up with him. "Don't go out with her," someone he knew at the time advised him. "She's got half the city following her around like they're tied up. And her, she only loves herself. Get out of your head before it's too late." He didn't. Things had broken down with his wife before the girl was born, and as soon as the baby was a year old, the couple divorced. Having obtained freedom, the ex-wife went to her homeland. There she was offered a job in her favorite specialty and promised to allocate an apartment. There are not for the child conditions. Sensible, she reasoned. It's cold, and I'll be at work from morning till night. Who'll look after Molly there? Let your daughter stay with you, and I'll keep an eye on her. William didn't mind. Molly stayed with her father. Her mother didn't come often, only a few times, but she corresponded with her daughter regularly. Letters from her came once a week and contained long, colorful descriptions of northern nature and stories about work, about acquaintances. At the end of the letter, Mom always asked her to send her regards to her ex-husband and politely inquired about his health and asked her daughter to take care of Dad. And at Christmas always came cards drawn by Mom's hand. She drew beautifully and could well have been a successful artist. Molly always felt that even though her mom was far away, she was very near. After all, the girl knew everything about her life. William, it seemed, and did not think to resent his ex-wife. On the contrary, often called her, told her a lot about her daughter, and invariably invited her to come and visit and stay for any length of time. Once, when he learned that his ex-wife was hospitalized with pneumonia, he himself went to her, assigning all the cases to assistants and brought with him the best pulmonologist. After she was discharged, he personally negotiated with his superiors a vacation for his ex-wife and paid for her vacation on the ocean coast. Just to be sure, he sent Molly along with her, and in that he was lucky, Charles thought bitterly. Yes, William's marriage didn't work out, but they had separated like people, friends, you might say, and the daughter remained with her father and mother. And James never knew his mother. Nancy, however, still occasionally appeared in Charles's life. There were, I think, only 3 such episodes. She somehow managed to find his phone number, and she always called at night. The first call was from New York. What was Nancy doing there? That remains a mystery. She called to wish Charles a Merry Christmas. There was a festive, cheerful noise in the receiver. She must have been calling from somewhere on the street. The city was rumbling behind her, bursting with people's laughter, deafening with fireworks, and voices speaking every language in the world were heard from everywhere. Nancy did not want to answer any questions, but she laughed merrily and wished her ex-husband health and happiness. "Why did you run away?" Charles shouted into the phone. "Why did you abandon the child? Do you even know what I named him? Do you know what your son's name is? Don't worry. Everything is fine with me. Nancy spoke dryly and immediately disconnected. A few months later, there was a call from Madrid. Not once did Nancy ask about her son, and she still didn't know his name. Cuckoo, cuckoo, still cuckoo. Bitter, Charles concluded. Forget it. You have a son growing up. Be happy for him. His friend advised him, and it was hard not to agree with him. When the children grow up, they'll get married. William smiled, cradling his daughter. Charles nodded again. That's a good idea, he said thoughtfully. Their fathers are friends. They've known each other since childhood, and love is love, but family is different. Strange, he thought so sincerely. But now, lying in a hospital bed, saved by his best friend and reassembled by the doctors, Charles felt a cold, slithering, snake-like envy crawling into his soul. Is this what William is in for, such inhuman luck? What had he done to deserve it? Fate saved him from Nancy, that's fine. You can explain that by the accidents of love. But what about now? They were traveling in the same car, rolled over together. Only Charles is lying there, unable to get up. And William, not even a scratch. He's a lucky bastard. I couldn't bear to think about it. It made me feel ashamed and even blacker than before. So what? Roughly interrupted James, unhurried story Kathy. Molly's father saved my life, and he ruined him for that. Do you hear yourself? Not for that. Kathy sighed, but because William, as it turned out, was luckier in everything. He and his wife were separated humanely, no arguments, no quarrels. He was in a car accident, and he didn't get a bruise or a scratch. He was unharmed, and Charles pulled him out. So he's the one for luck. What's this nonsense? Shocked, Molly whispered. Kathy's crazy stories still didn't fit in her head. They couldn't be true. It's all made up. Nonsense. Just because Daddy was luckier. The blonde shrugged her shoulders. Isn't that enough? I, for one, understand Charles perfectly well. Even if you and I are compared, I look at you, you fool, and I don't understand. Why are you so lucky? You were born into a rich family. You've never been denied anything. Your father was so caring. Even introduced me to you as an unknown older sister. Did not want to traumatize his daughter with the message that her daddy beautiful, a mistress appeared, and you have good suitors. Maybe he's a knave fool. I won't argue with that. But he's a good, decent, loyal man, and his pockets are not windy. Am I worse than you in any way? No, not worse, that's for sure. Maybe even prettier than you. And as for brains, there's nothing to talk about. I'm definitely the smarter of the two of us. Do you know where I lived? Do you know where I'm from? No, you don't. You bought that ugly dress in the second hand today, and my sister works in that second hand as a saleswoman. Her husband sits across the street, selling bath brooms. 2 twin boys, they send their children to grandmothers and grandfathers and work hard to earn money. And you've never worked a minute in your life, but you've never known need. Everything was brought to you and others like you on a golden platter. Right? But it's not my fault, Kathy. It's not my fault. Molly screamed. Did I take anything from you or your sister? Are you poor yourself? Not poor, not rich, but as it comes. Kathy grinned. I didn't get all this from the sky. I'm not happy with your dads, and I have to pretend to you, my stepsister. But it's better than selling rags in a garage or brooms. Huh, your father always thought we'd be friends, but there's one thing he didn't count on. I didn't want to be friends with you. But you. She sent James an affectionate smile. You could have married me instead of her. Kathy nodded at Molly. How am I any worse? James was silent for a long time. You disgust me." Finally, he said, "Molly, let's go." He squeezed his fiancée's hand tightly and turned toward the door. "Stop!" Kathy shouted. "Stop!" In one leap, as if transformed into a wild cat. She jumped out of her chair and rushed to the door, blocking the exit. "You forgot something, my sweet," she purred, but the purr was menacing. "You did rape me, didn't you? It was so horrible." She lowered her eyes and pretended to wipe away a tear. It looked pretty convincing. "You realize I don't even have to file a police report, right? Just complaining to your dad and your dad's dad would be enough." She looked at Molly. "It's scary to think what the consequences could be." "That's a lie," said James in an icy tone. "Get away from the door." The blonde didn't think to move. "But so be it," she said conciliatingly. "I won't say anything to anyone if you agree to pay me a small amount of money every month, just. That's enough." "You're not making any sense, Kathy." Molly tried to reach for the doorknob, and at the same second, Kathy grabbed the girl's wrist with her sharp fingernails. Let me go, it hurts, Kathy." But the blonde, without loosening her grip, with her free hand, grabbed Molly by the hair. "Not so fast," she hissed. James, squeezing between the girls, covered his fiancée with his own. Molly slumped against the wall, her face pressed into her fiance's back. Kathy, shrieking louder and louder, cut into her ears. "Help, help! Call the police!" "Calm down," James said, canting slightly. "There's been an attack." Safiya continued to shout, "Call the police." Keeping the blonde at arm's length was proving difficult. Kathy scratched and wriggled, hoping to get her nails on Molly. Something glassy fell to the floor with a clinking sound and rolled across the laminate floor. Molly quickly squatted down and grabbed the find first. The vial was small and could easily be hidden in the palm of her hand. The girl glimpsed the label and showed it to her fiancé. "Clophaline," he read it loudly, and then took the vial in his hand and threw it at Kathy. "You're the one who dropped it." Contemptuously, he threw it. The blonde caught the vial and quickly slipped it into the pocket of her robe. "Come on, Molly," James repeated and swung open the front door. "We should go." It was dark in Charles's apartment. William had asked his friend to turn off all the lights. "The light was making my eyes hurt," he explained. "It must be my nerves." They talked in the dark, illuminated only by the smoldering lights of cigarettes. From time to time, long streaks of light ran across the ceiling. Someone drove by with their headlights on. It was tolerable. You could close your eyes, and then your eyes would rest. But now, oblivious to the pain, he flicked the switch himself. Charles squeezed his eyes shut, but William didn't seem to notice the bright beam of light striking his eyes. His face was pale, frightened. "What are you saying?" he asked, shocked by his comrade's words. "What was that just now?" "Is this a joke?" Charles sighed. "I knew Kathy was looking for someone to leak your data to." He repeated, "You know you've got plenty of competitors. Getting to them isn't that big a deal. And they pay for information, and they pay well. All she had to do was choose the highest bidder." "Why would she do that?" "The boil, William. That I didn't give her enough money, kept her full, bought her an apartment. It was enough for all her desires. Did you give her enough?" "Fine." Charles calmed him down. There was enough for a good life, but the girl wanted stability, guarantees. She did not know how to save. It's not in her nature. Marrying you was out of the question, and the years go by. She was afraid that you will play with her, and as her age comes up, you will find someone younger, fresher, and Kathy in circulation on the sidelines of life. So she wanted to be on the safe side, to secure her future. Why? William rubbed his eyes. They were starting to hurt again. She didn't tell me, but she could have asked for what she wanted, couldn't she? A bank account, a house, a business. I wouldn't have spared her that. Charles laughed. Women, who the devil can tell when they don't always understand themselves. But she could sell the information, and she wanted it badly. The rumor had already spread among the competitors, and they were all ears. That's when I entered the arena. Made up a pathetic story about how I've been jealous of you all my life because you've always been undeservedly lucky. And so on and so forth. Lying, I hope? Not exactly. Charles shrugged guiltily. I was jealous of you. I was, many years ago, when, remember, you dragged me through the woods almost alive. So I had that sin. I was jealous. Even though I was ashamed that you weren't hurt in the accident, that Molly had a normal mother, not a slutty Nancy. I saw her, William said quietly. Nancy. I didn't want to tell you, but I went to Boston last year, and my parents are buried there. I went to the cemetery to worship the graves, and there was a fresh grave. Nancy. I saw the picture on the monument. I recognized it immediately. Someone from her family was there. I think it was a cousin, a second cousin, maybe a third cousin. I don't remember. Cleaning up her grave. I asked him what happened. Like her lover killed her, either out of jealousy or just drunk. She's always had a lot of admirers, lovers, and jealous men. At first, I wanted to call you and tell you, but then I thought, why? Only to reopen wounds. We've been strangers to her for a long time, said Charles calmly. She was a spoiled girl with a rotten streak. Well, may she rest in peace. She never even saw her son or knew his name. God be with her. The main thing is that you still have your capital, so you have nothing to grieve about, and the children's wedding is tomorrow. Do you think they'll live together? They will, I'm sure. William smiled and hugged his friend. Meanwhile, James and Molly were walking down the street, holding hands. You know, Molly, said the boy, I really like your dress, I really do, I really do. It's cool. You can say that too. Molly fixed the ruffle on the skirt and laughed. It's a real rag. It's just for mopping the floor. James only gripped the bride's hand tighter, brought it to his lips, and kissed the wrist marks left by Kathy's claws. You are the most beautiful in any dress. He said so quietly that it was almost impossible to hear the words. But the girl heard and smiled at her fiancé, shyly and gently. Then I like it too. Her smile became mischievous. That's what I'm going to marry you in tomorrow. James laughed, picked Molly up in his arms, and shouting loudly how much he loved her, began to twirl her around and kiss her on the lips. Is this really love? Molly closed her eyes and imagined their wedding. They would live in a big house and have 4 mischievous children with whom they would enjoy playing catch-up. 2 happy grandfathers, Molly's father William and James's father Charles.
Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. I don't understand what the problem is. If I am 43 years old and I have never been married, and I have no children, for some reason, my relatives don't like this situation at all. Their only desire in this life is to help me start a family. But how can they not realize that help is needed only when they ask for it? I have never regretted being single for a second. Not having children is such a gift from God. In fact, it's entirely my fault. I've always been careful. Protection above all else. Otherwise, at some point in your life, your potential children will come to you from all over the country, even from places you've never been. The mother, of course, is the one who worries the most. Even when my father was alive, she constantly tried to organize meetings with potential candidates for the role of my wife. All this looked as if quite by chance, the daughter of my mother's friend or colleague, or one of her students came to visit us. The options for calling these damsels names were countless. When her father passed away, she became more obsessive. In addition to constantly arranging so-called chance encounters, this is how she began to constantly drip on my brain. After I celebrated my 40th birthday, it was like she went crazy. It got to the point where I couldn't live with her. Basically, I was never ashamed of living with my parents. I was fine with it. I only came to this house to sleep over or have dinner. I work all the time. Even on weekends, I wanted to always get a big paycheck to constantly develop in this field. I did get more and more money every month, but still it was not enough for me. Why should I give up money if all I need to do is to spend a little more time in the office? I did not aspire to be a supervisor. Unlike a supervisor, my earnings depended only on myself, and he had a fixed salary periodically. My salary was more than his by a factor of 1.5 to 2 times. So, what's wrong with an ordinary working man? Apart from that, there were other pluses in the fact that I was an ordinary staff worker, while on the colleagues occupying managerial positions, girls hung like on the hanger of the theater outerwear. There wasn't as much attention directed at me. I was fine with that. I was not at all turned on by the fact that the girls saw me as a huge wallet. I like to choose a girl myself and pursue her. I don't know how to woo. I used all the conventional ways. Of course, all these years I really tried to find my soulmate. But my longest relationships have lasted no more than 5 months. The last relationship sucked all the energy out of me. I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Her name was Kathy. She was 20 years younger than me. I thought it was kind of cool at first. She had an energy inside her that spread to those around her. For some reason, at the bar, she had her eye on me. I tried my best to ignore her. I didn't want to get involved with underage girls. But then she managed to get me talking. Kathy turned out to be a nice person to talk to, and the time flew by. That's how we talked. And in the morning, I woke up in my bed with this girl lying on my chest. Her beautiful, long, curly, red hair was lying on the pillow, and part of it covered her bare breasts. I'll be honest, she looked stunning in the morning sunlight. I was so engrossed that at times I forgot to breathe so as not to wake her up. From that day on, our so-called love began. That girl did unimaginable things to me, manipulated me any way she wanted. I fell for it. I did everything she wanted. I bought her a car after a month. Yes, not a new one, but still, jewelry, a fur coat, even though it was summer. Travel. I gave her everything. And what I got in return? What did I get in return? Sex. And that's about it. She didn't cook, she didn't clean. She partied all the time. It's getting a little hard for me to live at her pace. I wouldn't mind her partying all the time, as long as she was happy. But every time she didn't get enough. I didn't understand what I needed to do to make her calm down, settle down. I even asked her, but she only put forward conditions under which she was willing to bring peace to my world. But she never kept her promises. Every time she returned home, all intoxicated and intoxicated. Sometimes I thought it wasn't just the alcohol. But personally, I did not force her for this action and did not find anything suspicious at home. It was over in a flash. Somehow I wanted to please her, to arrange a romantic evening. So I did not, as usual, delayed at work. I went home right after the end of the day. On the way, I stopped by the store to buy a bunch of flowers. I knew she was home because just before I got there, she had called me and complained that her friends had canceled a meeting, and she didn't know what to do that evening. I got home, walked into the hallway, and immediately ran through the apartment without noticing anything around the dining room was gone. Her in the living room went to the bedroom too. Well, you guessed what I saw there. As in the most bearded anecdotes, my beautiful, young, red-haired beauty was swallowed by some young man with milk on his lips. Not absolutely. Oh yeah. For all that, They were both naked and I stayed to watch it. They didn't notice me until about 7 minutes later. That's when I turned around and went into the living room. A couple minutes later, they both ran out of the bedroom. The guy headed straight for the exit, and Kathy headed for me. Why are you looking at me like it's my fault? I mean, it's not a big deal. David, I agree that it's an unpleasant situation, but let's be honest, it's entirely your fault. What are you out of your mind? How am I so guilty that you decided to ride another man? David, well, that's a lot of heat. It's very simple. You're a grown man and you should know where your behavior is leading. You chose me, knowing I'm half your age. You get caught up in work all the time, and I have certain needs. Henceforth, so that this doesn't happen again, pay more attention to me. Kathy, do you even see what you're saying? I'm always stuck at work because your appetites are growing by the day. And please tell me, when have I ever dared to deny myself your carnal needs? Well, it's never happened. I'm sure you deny me. Are you trying to make me complex? It's just that sometimes I have wild urges that need to be curbed, but you're not around. So sometimes I have to look for other options. I have to look. So it wasn't the only time, and you're so calm about it. No, it wasn't. Are you not hearing me at all? Well, reevaluate your life, and then we'll be fine. To say I was shocked is like saying nothing. I've never encountered such insolence. I'll be honest, I believed for a split second that I really was at fault for what had happened. I had to pull myself together, so I slapped my cheeks a couple times, and that helped. And then I got up, went into the hallway, grabbed Kathy's bag, then headed into the kitchen. The girl was drinking tea and looking out the window. I walked over to her, picked her up in my arms. Kathy thought I had admitted guilt and had come to make up. However, that was not the case. I went to the hallway and opened the front door. Kathy began to suspect something, so she started to pull away. But my grip was ironclad. I set her barefoot on the cold tile. Paul threw the bag on the floor and closed the door. Kathy still tried to bang on the door for a while and screamed all over the floor, but as soon as I threatened her with the police, she left. The girl was not happy that all her things were left at home, but I didn't care what she was wearing. Let her be happy that I left the car to her and go to the damn grandmother. After a while, I learned from acquaintances that Kathy knew from the beginning how much money I was making. That's why he was grooming me so much at the bar during our first meeting. At that moment, everything fell into place, and I was a fool to fall for her. It was probably just passion, though. If I had really fallen for her, I wouldn't have gotten rid of her so easily. Anyway, from that moment on, I wasn't interested in relationships anymore. All 3 years, I just chose women for fun even, and did not hide my income. Then things got easier. I just picked one day a week, went to a bar, and got what I wanted. If it was a busy week, I'd go to the bar 2 or 3 times. Mom saw my behavior change. She was always finding reasons for me to come to her when I met her, playing the same old songs. To be honest, I just let everything she said pass me by. After a while, I realized I couldn't let it go. Something must be done to calm my mother down. If she calmed down, my life would be at peace. I could think of nothing better to do than to find a fake bride. I had to choose a middle-aged woman because my mother would not fall for a young girl and continued to brainwash me. There were no single adult women in my neighborhood. I decided to look in the park. There was no time to wait, and it was Saturday. It was getting close to sundown, so there were a lot of people there. Probably a lot of visitors thought I was a maniac because I glare at every woman who even remotely fit my criteria. When I realized that I was frankly sad, I put on my glasses. I didn't want to end up for such a misunderstanding. And in the monkey house, they'd put a couple of cases on me. After 40 minutes, I found a woman who matched my requirements perfectly. I could tell she was a homemaker, but she wasn't a gray mouse. She looked delicious. A lot of young girls wouldn't have been on a par with her. Next to the woman was a boy of about 15 and a girl who was no more than 4 years old. I watched this family for about 30 minutes, and that's because I couldn't see. Is there a wedding ring on the ring finger of my potential bride's right hand? I tried to look from all angles, but nothing worked. Then I decided that I would sort of accidentally bump into her, and if there was no ring, I would meet her right away. I walked towards her and pushed her with my shoulder. Apparently, I didn't calculate my strength because the lady fell on the lawn. I didn't see that coming, and I was stunned. "Where are you going?" The guy brought me out of my trance. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I really didn't see you. You're all right." I rushed over to the woman to help her up. I was really afraid I'd hurt her. "Yes, thank you. I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm sure you didn't do it on purpose." God, how wrong was she? My face was getting angry paint. "Charles, don't be so rude. Not all people do harm on purpose. For God's sake, forgive my nephew. He's always protecting me since my husband left me." My gaze slid down her arm. There really was no ring. That's good news. What's even better news is that, pray tell, it's only her nephew. That fact made it much easier, because young boys are very wary of a potential stepfather, albeit a fictitious one. And I understand this is your young protector. You can tell he's ready to snatch me up with just a look. "Charles, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your aunt. Or maybe you did, but on the bed. She's a very pretty mademoiselle. I'd like to rectify the situation." "How is that possible?" "Well, for starters, I can take you to the infirmary so we can all make sure you're all right." "You what?" "Take it easy. But I've been rolling around in the grass a little bit. There's Betty already rolling around in the park every day." The woman pointed to the girl who was lying on the lawn with her own grass. "Well, then maybe we can get acquainted, and I'll buy you dinner, all of you." I stand corrected. We can get acquainted. I have to know the name of the person I'm supposed to avoid, in order not to end up on the grass again, the woman said with a smile. "My name is Adriana." "You have a very beautiful name, Adriana," said I in a languid voice, extending my hand. "And I am David. Our names sound similar. Maybe it's not a coincidence that we met." "Well, I don't know. It wasn't what you'd call a pleasant encounter." She seemed more confident than I first thought. "So how about dinner?" "My treat. Everybody dance, as they say." That's when the kid's eyes lit up. Apparently, his parents and Adriana didn't spoil him with much in the way of goodies. "All right, but we'll have dinner without the kids." But the aunt pulled Charles' no aunts. "Take Betty's hand and go home. There's everything in the refrigerator so you can satisfy your hunger. The adults need to talk." 3. "What's that for?" "Let me drive them home." "Why walk? And you won't have to worry." "I'm not gonna worry about it. We live a block away from this park. The boys won't even have to cross a busy road." At that moment, Charles took her hand, showed us his tongue, and the girl repeated after him. The sight was very cute. A genuine smile stretched across my face. The guys headed towards the exit of the park. I hesitated a bit as I didn't know what to do with Adriana, whether to give her a hand or not. I mean, she had just fallen. Maybe she really needed my help. There were already a few sparks running between us, though, so the gesture could be interpreted differently. And I wouldn't want that, because the woman I was looking for was fictitious. She had a role to play. I wasn't interested in anything else. Adriana. The first one headed toward the exit, and I, not knowing what to do, put my hands behind my back. I probably looked like a prisoner, but I didn't care. The important thing was not to ruin something that wasn't even there yet. I walked the woman to my car, opened the door for her like a true gentleman. I got behind the wheel, and we drove off. At that moment, I had no idea where we were going. I had to pick a mid-range establishment, so to speak, so she wouldn't think I was courting her. On the way to another neighborhood, I saw a small restaurant and stopped outside of it. The hostess took us to a table on the veranda. The place was delightful, and so was the view. It was already sunset, and the sky was going from bright blue to deep purple, and in the middle was a streak of red. Adriana looked ravishing. For her age, I was sure she'd order some standard Kaiser. We'll talk. However, the woman surprised me. She ordered lamb kebab and young potatoes. I don't know what was on my face, but when she looked up at me, she said, "You probably know what it's like to spend all day with kids and feet." "I'm lying around and hungry as a dog," said the woman and burst into loud laughter. Unfortunately, I can't imagine what you are experiencing. I don't know how you perceive my facial expression, but I was just surprised that a woman with such a beautiful figure eats potatoes with mutton. Oh, I was shy. So don't be shy. Order whatever you want, I said with a smile. No, let's stop here, or I'll change now, and then I'll want to sleep. I won't care what you talk to me about. I will demand that you take me home. What do you say? Tell me about your children. I understand Charles is your nephew. And Betty. Who's Betty? Daughter? You could say that, but more specifically, if you don't mind. A daughter. A daughter who decided to have a baby as an adult. You are tactfully silent, but I can see that you want to ask me what. How old am I? You don't have to deny it. I can see it in your eyes. Of course, it's indecent for a woman to ask such a question. But I'm not the hidden type. I'm 40 years old and you're 43. Wow. How did you know that? It didn't even take you long to figure it out. I've known you for as long as I've known you. I've been intuitive since I was a child. My father trusted me to pick lottery tickets when I was very young. And guess what? We hit the jackpot. So keep in mind, I can be very useful to you. Adriana had a wide smile on her face, which mesmerized my gaze. Shall we switch to you? I suggested, for I was tired of this officiousness. Let's do it. I began to ask Adriana about her life. I needed to find the perfect woman for the role of a bride, albeit a fictitious one. My mother was a smart, wise woman. She was determined to every little detail. So everything had to be perfect, impossible to tamper with. It turned out that Adriana owned one of the drugstore chains in our town. That was a good thing. The woman had everything she needed, which meant she had no claim on my money. Adriana would have wanted to step away from her business a long time ago and turn the chain of pharmacies over to someone else, but she couldn't trust anyone. The woman said she would run the outlets as long as she could. Then she would simply sell the business. Adriana was a very pleasant person to talk to. To be honest, I didn't want to ruin the evening with my proposal. Adriana was worth more than that. And I was almost certain that my proposal would offend the woman. But it was worth a try, as they say. Adriana, I have a confession to make. I only ask one thing. You listen to me all the way through before you jump to conclusions. Sounds interesting. Well, let's give it a try. I'm listening. I took in a full chest of air. My heart began to pound harder, echoing in my ears. It was no longer acceptable to back up. Adriana, I didn't crash into you by accident, but I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. When I saw you on the lawn, I freaked out and cursed myself with all the right words in the world. I meant to hit you gently with my shoulder, but I didn't realize the force. So I'm prepared to apologize to you for the rest of my life. I'm so ashamed. Shut up, please, I said between words as I saw Adriana open her mouth to say something. I'll go on. Why did I do it? That's the question you're asking. I wanted to meet you, but I didn't see you. Is there a wedding ring on your finger? I thought I'd check it that way. Again, I'm sorry, please. After that, I got to the point. I told the woman about how my mother cares for me despite my advanced age. Of course, I was afraid to seem like a mama's boy in her eyes. However, I could not pass this part of the story about myself. Then I smoothly came to the fact that my mother's cherished dream is that I have a family. Adriana, please, there's not much left. You see, her obsession had become so unbearable that I was almost desperate, so I decided on one strange act. Introduce my mother to a fictitious bride. The woman interrupted me. I was blown away by her insight. No, you had to. I was trying to make it sound veiled. Did I just blurt it out to her? I'm not gonna ask you how you figured it out, but yes, you're right. I thought it was a fake relationship. Please note, not a marriage, but a relationship. It's the best way out of this situation. Well, you know, my mother's not gonna be fooled. She can detect deception. I didn't want some girl who'd do anything for money. I wanted an older woman. You mean old? No? Adriana, no. You can't find a smart woman these days. That's why I looked and looked, and I chose you. Jesus, you've been following me around in a frightened tone of voice, she said. Not just today. I've been watching you for half an hour. Anyway, I've decided you'd be perfect for the role. I'm willing to offer you anything. Please help me. Sounds very strange, to be honest, but I've always been very adventurous. So I guess I'll take it. But I have one condition. I agree to all say that I have not fallen in love with me, that you have not fallen in love with me. I speak Russian, yes. I ended up laughing. It's been a long time since anyone made me laugh like that. I mean, come on. Was she really so sure of herself that she would assume I was falling in love with her? She's an attractive woman, no doubt. But you don't fall in love with someone like her when you're older. They choose them for a home that's cozy and clean and smells of borscht and hockey sticks. I promise, Adriana, that I do not fall in love with you, I said with a slight smile. After that, we were clear on the goals we had to reach. It took us at least an hour and a half to come up with a plan of action. During this time, we drank 2 cups of coffee, and it got dark outside. Not a single star was visible in the sky. It was covered with clouds and a light breeze came up. But it was cold, so I took off my jacket and threw it over Adriana's shoulders. I'm a gentleman. What a nobody. There was no time to delay. So we scheduled the meeting with my mother for tomorrow. Despite the fact that Adriana was an elegant woman, I asked her to observe some dress code. No cleavage, no skirts above the knees, no loose hair. My mother considered all women who didn't adhere to these criteria very frivolous. And what man would want his fiancée to be considered as such, even if it was fictitious? After the discussion, we went home. I drove Adriana home. She actually lived in the heart of the city in a swanky new housing complex. I even managed to get a good look at her windows because Charles was standing in one of them, and 4-year-old Betty's head was sticking out of the other. They were waiting for a woman not 1 o'clock. At this point, I even felt ashamed. It was because of me. They'd spent so much time alone. I hoped they weren't hungry. If they'd come to dinner with us then, I probably wouldn't have told Adriana everything. And the kids don't need to hear that. Adriana left, and I headed home. That night must have been endless. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get the thought out of my head that our plan was going to fail. And then I remembered the woman's words when she asked me not to fall in love with her. A smile spread across my face. It felt so warm. But I didn't understand why this was happening, and shook my head sharply, as if to empty it. I must have fallen asleep in the morning. So when the alarm clock rang, I didn't even realize where I was. Like a robot, I got up, washed my face, and went to work. I stopped at a coffee shop on the way and got a double espresso. I needed a dose of pep. I took 3 sips. I was going to repeat the purchase, but I thought the effect would come a little later. And I was right. For the first hour at work, I just sat there staring at the wall. How could I write program code if I forgot even my name from excitement? Not to mention the name of my so-called fiancé. When the vigor began to appear in me, I immediately got to work. The cat was pissing himself. My fingers couldn't keep up with my thoughts. I was sure that at the end of the working day I would discover mistakes. But I was wrong. The program worked the first time. It helped to cheer me up even more. I urgently needed to come to my senses because the meeting with my mother was getting closer. Right after the end of the workday, I went home, showered, shaved, and styled my hair. Everything has to be a high level. Otherwise, my mother wouldn't believe the scam. After I realized I looked amazing, I went to pick up Adriana. As I drove up, I noticed she was already waiting for me at the entrance. She looked amazing. She was wearing a classic black background dress that developed easily in the wind, a 3/4 arm on her feet, classic boat shoes, and in her hands a wisp of delicate purple that matched her belt perfectly. This woman certainly had taste. As Adriana got into the car, I could smell the scent of her perfume. It was different from the one she had been wearing yesterday. The day before, she smelled of the sea and freshness. Today, it was a pleasant floral scent with a slight sweetness. "Hi." I held out my hand, hoping she would put her graceful hand in it. "You look stunning." "Hello, David. Really, all your wishes are taken care of?" she asked. A slight smile appeared on her face. I was staring so hard that I didn't even realize we were already holding hands. "You're more than ready. Let's go." Adriana bowed and waved as if the coachman was sitting in front of us. I didn't hesitate. I started the car, pressed the gas pedal, and drove toward my mother's house. Adriana and I had a pleasant conversation on the way. She was talking about how Charles and Betty had greeted her warmly yesterday. The boys had missed their aunt and Mom so much that they had decided to make her dinner. True, it was very different. They served her a salad of red fish apples, crab sticks, and mayonnaise. Adriana recounted that she tried her best to pretend that it was the most exquisite dish she had ever tasted in her life. She prayed to God that the kids would get away from her as soon as possible so she could stop eating that salad. She told it so emotionally that I couldn't keep from laughing. Tears came to my eyes, which made me unable to see the road well. The woman made me laugh so hard that I had to park in the first place I could find. When we pulled up to my mother's house, my heart sank. I knew it was all fictitious, but I was worried as if Adriana was really my fiancée. The woman gently took my hand and told me not to worry. She promised that everything would go off to the best of her ability. I believed her because she was a wise and responsible woman. I think that if she could not fulfill my request, she would have given up on the scam right away. She was not the kind of person who could and liked to lose. More accurately, no one likes to lose. However, some people aren't even upset by it. They take it for granted. We got out of the car, and from that moment on we looked like a couple in love. After all, my mother could stand at the window and watch us. Adriana took me under her arm, and like a gallant cavalier I led her to the entrance, opened the door, and held her close. When we took the elevator to the floor we needed, we found that the door to the apartment was already open, and half of my mother's face was peering out of it. She was too curious. "But couldn't you just wait in the apartment? That's where we're going anyway." "Hello, my son, my good son." God, I couldn't believe it. That you would come to me today, and not alone at the expense of Metal Mother. "Hello, Mom. What did you think I was doing, lying to you?" "Meet my girlfriend, Adriana." Adriana walked up to her mother and extended her hand. Mom responded to her welcoming gesture. "Adriana, I'm so glad my dummy has you, but don't get too excited. It's just that we haven't met at all yet. It's nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you. Of course, of course. Let's get acquainted. Why are you standing in the hallway? Come into the hall. David, help your bride." "Mom, we're going out." "Well, it's not hard for a girl to grow up to be a bride. I'm sure you won't drag this out too long. I'm not young at all. And I'd like to babysit grandchildren very much." Adriana's mom turned around and gave me her beautiful smile. It was obvious that the woman was feeling a little awkward. I can't imagine how much the discomfort level would have increased if we were actually dating. Mom was pushing us when we were still in the hallway. What would happen when we made our way into the living room? I had no idea at the time. A sumptuous table was set in the hall. The food was as good as a restaurant's in appearance. Even for a second, I thought that my mom had hired a chef to prepare all these delicious dishes. Of course, that wasn't actually true. My mom had a lifelong love of cooking, and she did it deliciously. Her dishes were not only delicious, but beautiful as well. Over the years, she had honed her skills. We sat down at the table, so there was no doubt in my mother's mind that we were dating. We sat very close to each other, so our hands and feet were touching. At this point, I noticed that my body was responding to this kind of contact. I had to remember the not-so-great moments of my life, so as not to embarrass myself. But I thought Adriana had noticed something, because she looked at me with a sly look and a smile that said, "Yeah, so maybe we'll have a real relationship, I can see that." It made me very uncomfortable. "Adriana, well, tell me what you do in life." The woman happily began to tell me about herself. I started to worry that she wouldn't say too much, because she was very enthusiastic. My mom listened with interest. I could see from her face that she was pleased that Adriana had her own chain of pharmacies. She even joked that she now knew where to go with the list of medicines that the doctor would make at the appointment, because the treatment was very expensive. At first, I wanted to ask her why she was going to be treated, but then I bit my tongue, because at her age all the sores come out. "Adriana, how old are you?" "Mom, isn't it unseemly for you to be so hard on her? But I have to know if your woman can give birth to you or not. I can see she's not a girl anymore." After saying that, I was speechless. That's when my mother became so tactless. How could she even say such a thing? Looking at her face, I realized that she didn't regret the question she asked. The silence was awkward and dragged on. Adriana realized she had to do something. "Honey, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm 40 years old," she said with a soft smile. 40, her mother said thoughtfully. "That's menopause. It is not a fact that you will be able to get pregnant." "Mom, come on, Mom, who's going to take care of you if not me? Maybe she'll leave you when she realizes she can't give birth to you." "Mom, God, honey, calm down. You know that in today's world, medicine doesn't stand still. If you can't get pregnant naturally, you can use IVF. It's such a small thing." I marveled at how my fictitious fiancé kept her composure, and the insults flying at her weren't fictitious at all. What normal person wouldn't take offense at something my mother said, no matter who that person was? He would feel insulted. But IVF is nice, but it doesn't feel real. "Don't worry, I've got kids. They can help relieve your loneliness if you need it." God, why did she have to say that? This is a real failure, I thought, and I was right. I can see why you're not so worried about getting pregnant. It's just that you already have kids and don't need any more. Mom, please, let's just drop the subject. We did close the subject. I realized that I had a conversation with my mother ahead of me. I was sure she'd be crazy about Adriana. But from the very doorstep, she wasn't satisfied with her age. The interesting thing is that she wouldn't be satisfied with the age of the bride. In any case, she would arise that she was too young and would leave me, and the other one was old and would not bear me children with my mother. There was no golden mean. The rest of the time we talked about distracted topics. Mom was already unwilling to continue the event, and Adriana masterfully built herself a fool who supposedly does not understand anything. That's commendable. After all, one should treat one's mother-in-law with leniency, even if it is a fictitious one. I'm sure that this behavior of my companion, Mom, was even angrier. She liked it when people reacted painfully to her words. Mom thought she was always telling the truth. I thought she was just being rude. I didn't have the energy to continue the evening. So Adriana and I cited fatigue and left Mother's house. At the threshold, my mother reached out to kiss me goodbye and whispered in my ear, "See your lady off and come back to me to talk." Shit, that's what I was most afraid of. But I didn't let on. Adriana took my hand, and we headed for the elevator. We didn't say anything until we were out of the elevator and in the car. And Adriana, please forgive her. I'm just shocked. I had no idea she'd act like this. She's always been like this, but not on the day she met her future daughter-in-law. How could she even say that? You're at a normal age. Do you hear me, normal? I started yelling as I drove to her house. David, stop it. She's right here. As a mother, I wouldn't be happy with your choices either. You're a young man. You need children. And a woman like me would not be able to give birth to you, or I'd be afraid to. At that age, there can be complications not only for the baby, but for the mother as well. Stop talking nonsense. I was losing my temper. By then I was pulling into Adriana's driveway. I said, "You're a normal age. I don't think it's as bad as my mother says," I blurted out as I pulled the car over. Prove that you don't think so." With a charming smile, said Adriana. I was confused. I didn't understand what she was expecting from me. My body reacted strangely to her words with some unknown impulse. I threw myself on top of her and kissed her. Her lips were very soft, and I felt an electric shock run through my body. It was a long-forgotten feeling. For several years, no woman had stirred in me such desire as she did today. My hands disobeyed my brain and continued to explore her body. It was beautiful, despite her age. Adriana, on the other hand, also had a genuine desire. It was evident in her demeanor. Her breasts rose higher and higher as her breathing became heavier and heavier. I was somewhat surprised at this turn of events, as I thought that my fictitious bride was responsible for the task I had set for her, namely creating the illusion of an ideal couple, nothing more. But I could tell from her that she had wanted me for a long time, and that fact was a pretty big boost to my self-esteem back then. And not just hers. I don't even remember how we ended up in Adriana's apartment, because I don't think we stopped kissing at all. Her lips were so soft, so passionate. I was starting to taste blood after a lot of kissing. Apparently, Adriana hadn't practiced such long kisses in a long time. Opening the front door, we piled into the apartment. After that, it was like we were blown away. I started tearing off her clothes like a beast and completely stopped thinking about the fact that there might be children in the house. Adriana, as if she sensed that I had that question inside of me. "It's okay, they're gone," the woman said with a huff. "They are at their grandmother's house, don't worry." After that, I realized that I was allowed to do everything that I had previously been afraid to even imagine. The rest of the time, we did not get out of bed. I'll leave out all the details, but I will only say that in the morning I felt as if I had been run over by a roller. All my muscles and joints ached, as if I had not made love. Yesterday I worked out and left world records in weightlifting. When I woke up, Adriana was still in bed and singing sweetly. At some point I realized I couldn't stop looking at her. At that moment she seemed to me the most beautiful creature on this planet. I couldn't understand what this woman had done to me. After all, until a few days ago, I was not interested in anything but my work. Adriana was good too. It turns out she had deceived me. I mean, we agreed beforehand that our relationship would be a sham. And today I'm in bed with her after a hot night I'll probably never forget. I wonder how Adriana will feel when she wakes up. Maybe she'll be ashamed. Or maybe she'll want a sequel. Maybe after this, she'll think I'll marry her. What if I do marry her? I don't reject that possibility at all. I had once thought that this woman would only help me to put my mother's guard down. I didn't think she'd make me go crazy. When Adriana opened her eyes, I pretended like a boy to be asleep. My eyes were slightly open, so I saw everything through my lashes. She lost her eyes with her beautiful hands. After that, she looked at me as if I was the love of her life. Maybe that's how it really was. I guess I'd like to believe it, but I was convinced otherwise. Adriana had a recent love anyway, as evidenced by the presence of her little girl, Betty. The woman had a look on my face. A slight, gentle smile appeared on her face. 15 minutes later, she got up and left the room. At this point, I rolled over onto my back, put my hands behind my head, opened my eyes, and stared up at the ceiling. At first, I just didn't know how to act. It was because I couldn't decide what I felt for this beautiful woman. Fragments of last night's flawless and passionate night began to appear in my mind. For a moment, I fell out of reality and only came back when Adriana appeared in front of my face with a tray in her hands. The fragrant smell of coffee wafted through the room. "Good morning, honey," the woman said casually. The way she addressed me made me speechless. I could only reward her with a slight smile. I hope that at that moment she thought that I didn't answer her only because I had just woken up. David, calm down. I can see in your eyes that you're really stressed out about last night. Relax. We're adults. We did what we wanted to do. This whole fake marriage thing really got on your nerves. Your mother didn't give us a hard time last night. If you thought I didn't realize it, I'm offended that you think I'm so stupid. Come on, wake up. The coffee will get cold, and it won't be so refreshing. I know something else that'll perk you up in the morning. I didn't expect myself to say it. I'm embarrassed to ask what it is. Did I ask you to put the breakfast tray on my nightstand? There was a look of bewilderment on her face. It amused me even more when her hands were free. I grabbed her wrists and pulled her down onto the bed. The woman was pleasantly surprised. She was smiling and laughing. I continued to do what I hadn't had time to finish during the night. Yes, the night was very short indeed. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have gotten out of bed for 3 days. Maybe she's expressing something in another way. There's no way I can explain the irresistible attraction. My lips explored every inch of her body. I wanted her to feel how hot they were. Her body responded to every kiss I gave her. Goosebumps covered her skin. Her legs, her arms trembled slightly. I don't think I'd ever turned on a woman this hard before yesterday. Yes, it was beautiful. That's how our morning went. Of course, by the time we were done making love, the coffee was already icy, figuratively speaking. To be honest, I didn't care for it at all. I began to catch myself thinking that I felt more than comfortable in the company of this beautiful woman. It was obvious that she had absolutely no regrets. I wondered if she had any feelings for me. Why does she always act like nothing happened? Or is that how it's supposed to be? It's not how it's supposed to be. And there were thoughts going through my head all the time. Sometimes I felt like I was mumbling to myself. Maybe I was, because after a few minutes of silence, Adriana said, "I told you not to fall in love with me." After saying that, I'm seething. Indeed, she did say that. How could she have known it would end up like this? Why are you looking at me like that? David, when you pushed me in the park, I could see from your face that you liked me. I didn't take your request seriously at first. I thought you were just looking for an excuse to meet me. But after just an hour, I realized you weren't lying. You really wanted to give your mother a show like this. I'm sure it didn't look the same in your head. And you may be surprised now, but in my head, it ended up exactly the way it did. Do you really want to talk about the fact that it was written all over my face that in just a few days you and I would be lying in the same bed together? No, not that literally. I could tell by the look on your face that you didn't mind waking up in bed with me. God, why do you look so scared? Do I look like a witch to you? Relax, I'm not a witch, just very perceptive women. At that moment, I was really in shock. My state of mind was not due to being shrewd, but because she was indeed right. After all, it was then that I chose Adriana from the crowd, not because she looked like a hostess, but because she was unrealistically attractive against the rest. Agree that when you choose your bride, even an efficient one, you would still want her to be beautiful and attractive. That's why I made a mistake. Instead of Adriana, I should have stopped my eyes on some gray, unremarkable mouse. And to make Mom happy, this mouse had to be younger than me, but not by much. Although I don't know what would have to happen for my mom to be happy with my choice. She would probably be pleased only in one case, if she herself had chosen a bride for me from all her students, daughters, friends, nurses, from the district polyclinic. Well, to hell with it, whatever happens. After all, I'm not going to marry her. It's not like I'm a teenager who loses his head to the first woman who gives him a mind-blowing night. But also the morning, of course. I got out of bed, not even bothering to cover myself with something she didn't see there. Walking over to Adriana, I slapped her. I couldn't resist. She's got a delicious figure, I'll give her that. What are we going to do? Shy like a boy? I asked the woman who was stirring my emotions. With what? David, just because we slept together. even if more than once does not mean that between us urgently need to tie the relationship. It's not going to happen against our will. Are you against it? Honey, you are the one who hired me for a fake relationship, not me. With a gentle smile, Adriana said. There was some confusion on my face. I couldn't find the words to say because I didn't know what expressions of feelings would be appropriate in this situation. Why are you looking at me so guiltily? David, we are well into our 20s. Moreover, well into our 35th decade. You realize how much that phrase terrifies me. But nevertheless, we have the right to do whatever we want and sleep with whomever we want. So what's wrong with that? How can you even say that? It was fantastic. You're an excellent lover and, frankly, a good woman. Unexpectedly, I blurted it out to Adriana. It's all out in the open. At that moment, I felt like a boy in front of an experienced adult woman because her face didn't show an ounce of confusion. She knew she was good. I was turned on and annoyed at the same time by her self-confidence. Adriana, I'm going to confess to you, even though I don't know what to confess. I really don't know how I feel about you. I don't think I've ever felt this way in my entire life. I just don't know what it is. But then, so be it. She said with a smile. What life will lead to, that we will be happy. But I'll keep my promise anyway. Your mother will be fooled. Even if we don't have a real relationship, it's already a matter of principle for me. She's so old. And your son didn't think so at all this night, Adriana said. I rolled in laughter. I realized that if it was not love, it was obvious adoration. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I never thought that in my old age I would sincerely give flowers and gifts to someone. Adriana and I met 2 or 3 times a week. I didn't want it to be just sex. I knew I wanted something more. I took her out on dates to the best restaurants in town, to last-minute movies, to the theater. I wanted our relationship to be romantic. I knew that sooner or later the candy bouquet period would end, so I wanted it to bring as many positive experiences as possible. Everything was pretty good, but just one thought kept me on my toes. I didn't understand how Adriana felt about me. She was acting dignified, and I would even say reserved. She had never been known for her warmth. In words, in behavior, only when we were in the bedroom. She was ready for me like an affectionate cat. Nightly flings allowed me to let all my emotions out: love, passion, jealousy, anger, and resentment at her coldness. Yes, I did fall in love with her. It took me about 3 weeks to realize it. The realization came the day I woke up in the morning in my apartment, turned on my other side, hoping to hug Adriana. But the other half of the bed was empty. I hoped she had woken up earlier and was now in the kitchen making coffee. I couldn't smell the coffee aroma. However, after going through all the rooms, I realized she wasn't in the apartment. I picked up my phone and found a message on it. Sorry, urgent business. She left. Didn't even have a family yet. I'll see you next week. In that moment, somewhere in my chest, it felt like I had a red-hot spear stabbed into my heart. Why was her message so aloof? Why was she so distant from me? Do I not arouse in her an ounce of tender feeling? I was ready to tear the whole place apart. I realized that I wanted her around me all the time. Not a couple days a week, but 24/7. Why has no other woman in my life ever evoked such feelings in me? Why does she accept my advances? She sleeps with me, but she's not affectionate. I had 1,000 questions, but I guess I was never going to get answers. All this time, we no longer went to visit my mother. In fact, I could have brought any girl to her in whom she would have immediately found 1,000 flaws. After that conversation, my mother told me that she no longer wanted us at her place, and she also disapproved of my choice. Even if we get married, my mother will not come to the celebration, so as not to once again be upset about how old my spouse is. Can you imagine this from my mother, who has been hoping for years for some woman to take me in? And here she was with one of the best options, and still she's not happy. Women, they're nothing but trouble. That's true. Until I had Adriana in my life, the only trouble was with my mother. But now there's two of them, and I lost all sense of ground. I just stopped having confidence in the future. I decided that I would no longer call or write Adriana myself. I'll admit it was unrealistic hard. I wanted to ask the neighbors to tie my hands behind my back, but then I decided it wouldn't help. If I wanted to, I would have typed a message to her, but I held on with all my might to get her out of my head for a moment. I started to drink a little too much alcohol just to relax and stop catching the train of thought that was keeping me from resting. 3 days later, a text came to my phone late at night. I was already asleep, but decided to read it as usually no one texted me this late. It was a message from her long me to stand under the door, and I jumped up like scalded. I didn't immediately realize she was standing outside my apartment. I was trying to get my room in order, grabbing a bunch of stuff and throwing it into my closet. I'm sure she heard all of that. I could directly feel her standing outside the door, smiling. 5 minutes later, at least I didn't think it had been more than that, and I flew up to the front doors, barred by my hair sticking out. Opening the door, I saw Adriana. She was marvelously beautiful. In her hands, she held a bottle of semi-sweet red wine. "Did you clean up?" Adriana asked, smiling. "I didn't. I was just sleeping. I didn't immediately realize you were standing outside my apartment." I started making excuses like a kid. "Yeah, who was running around your apartment at breakneck speed and banging on the closet doors?" "Adriana, why would it make you feel better if I told you I did a little scatterbrain?" "Of course it would make me feel better, but your little bit, that's a lie. A little is no more than 5 minutes. I've been standing here for 20. You have. Oh God, I'm sorry. But why are you standing on the doorstep? Come on in. If you had invited me in sooner, we wouldn't have had to work things out in the common hallway," Adriana said. I sensed she was annoyed. I wanted to beg her forgiveness, but I didn't. I still had some pride left in me. Why should I apologize? If we'd made an appointment beforehand, everything would have been top-notch. She knew that, but now she just showed up unannounced, and I was beginning to wonder why. "Maybe you were here with your mistress. Is that it?" She was getting jealous. Confidence started to spread. Confidence began to spread throughout her body. "Or maybe you were a beer drinker or something," I asked the woman. A smug smile began to appear on my face. "I'm jealous. Who do you take me for? What am I? 15 years old? I was just asking. I just wanted to tell you that if you're ever with a girl and I show up uninvited, just don't open the door. Text me. I'll understand. You're entitled to have fun whenever and with whomever you want." She was clearly unhappy that I caught her being jealous, but I understood. Finally, after all this time, she was mine. I wanted to keep playing this game, but I was afraid I'd overdo it. She'd get angry and leave. That's not what I wanted. I demanded her constant presence around me. Walking over to her, I gently brushed a strand of hair out of her face and tucked it behind her ear. My hand slowly descended from her head, Natalia. All the while she looked at me without running. At one point, it seemed to me that what stood in front of me was not a grown woman, but a girl of about 18. She desired me. I could tell. Her shyness repulsed me a little. After all, I had never noticed this quality in the moments of our encounters. I couldn't hold back long and kissed her. God, how long had I waited for this? The few days we hadn't seen each other seemed like an eternity. Her coldness made me think that she didn't care about me. But now I realize I was wrong. She tried to deceive me, but her body says otherwise. I'll leave out what happened next. I'll just say it was wonderful. It was like having our first time again. "Adriana, why are you trying to pretend?" I asked her as she lay on my chest. "I mean, what am I faking? You imagined it." It was clear from her voice that she was agitated and trying hard to hide her emotions. "Adriana, our entire relationship, I thought I was indifferent to you, and you were with me only because you were interested in participating in the scam I offered you when you disappeared in the morning and disappeared for a few days. I gave myself my word that I wouldn't write you a single message. Do you have any idea how hard that was for me? I started drinking before bed, but there was a fine line. If I drank a little more, I'd be on your doorstep in half an hour. If I drank less, I couldn't sleep because you fogged my judgment, and I couldn't think of anything but you. And what makes you think I'm pretending? Raising her tone slightly, Adriana asked. Now she no longer looked like a self-sufficient adult who knew the value of her time and feelings. Everything remained as it was. Adriana, why are you deceiving me? You're acting differently now. In my eyes, you're like a young girl who's overcome with jealousy. Just because you think you are, doesn't mean you are. Maybe you're the one who sees me that way. But in the eyes of others, I haven't changed. Adriana, tell me. She lay on my chest again and was silent for about 5 minutes. And then she sucked in a breath. What did she scream? What do you want to hear? That I love you? Yes, I do. Why was I acting like that? Because I didn't want to admit it to myself. I'm 40 years old. What love? Even before we met, I believed in love. My last boyfriend looked quite solid and respectable, but in reality, he turned out to be a common Alfonso. Oh God, yes. If he'd only been an Alfonso, I wouldn't have cared so much. He humiliated me and he stole from me. Do you have any idea how I feel? I'm scared, David. I don't want what we have to turn into something more. You know, people move in and out all the time. Breakups are inevitable. Even though you know you have no future with that person, it still hurts so much when he leaves you. What makes you think that if we get back together, we'll break up? You're setting yourself up for negativity. In this case, of course, nothing good can come of it. You'll always look for faults in me. Like now, you came here for a reason. You're used to me writing you almost every day. And now I've disappeared. You didn't come here mostly because you missed me, but because you were sure I had someone. No, that's not true. Adriana looked at me with eyes of her own. She knew she was lying, and it was very obvious. Okay, you win. Yes, I'm jealous, yes. It was crazy to me when you stopped texting me. I thought you were just trying to get rid of me in my long life. I've been dumped by men a few times without saying anything. That's what annoys me the most. If you've fallen out of love, say so. If you have someone else, say so. And you look for the easiest ways, not thinking that you will bring a lot of pain to the person who loves you more than anything else in the world. Adriana, calm down. You're acting like you just ran into my apartment and found some girl in my bed, sitting on top of me. She came on top of me. I was asleep. Then I woke up and started cleaning up fast. Scattered all over the couch. What's your beef with me? Why are you acting like this? Why can't you just accept a situation where we love each other? Even if you're sure it's not forever, it might be a good idea to live in the present, not the past, not the future. If you're happy here and now with me, why should you care about what will happen in a month or a year? At that moment, I turned my eyes to Adriana and saw that tears were streaming down her cheeks. More than anything, I disliked women who cried. It had to do with the fact that I just didn't know how to act. I hugged her, kissed the top of her head, but I couldn't find the right words. You can't say the right thing when you don't know the reason for the tears. We sat on the bed for about 10 minutes, her crying on my chest and me stroking her hair. After that, I found the strength to tell her how I felt about her. The woman began to calm down. Her sobs became quieter and quieter. The tears were no longer flowing so heavily. Yes, we had such a difficult conversation a month after we met. It's very difficult when two adults with broken hearts meet and realize they have some magical feelings for each other. It's always a scary moment. I understood him like no one else because I felt the same way. I've been through betrayal and lies, but I don't want to think about it now. At that time, what I wanted most of all was to live today, to feel it as much as possible, not caring about what awaits us in a year or two. I realized that Adriana wanted the same thing, but had a lot of fear. Despite this, we started dating her. To be honest, I wanted us to move in together. However, Adriana was against it. I did not put pressure on her as I realized that she needed time to make sure that I would not bring her harm and pain. Despite this, we went on dates every day. It was a magical time for me. I enjoyed every second I spent with her by my side. Adriana really stopped being the willful person she seemed at first. She was turning into a young girl in love. I liked that so much. It seemed to me that this woman was a combination of contradictory qualities. I didn't know what to expect from her in any given situation. Sometimes she would reprimand me like a strict teacher, and sometimes she would make me steal lilacs from the flower beds. Sometimes she wanted to watch some art house movie, and sometimes she wanted me to run barefoot across the lawn. It was really quite entertaining. She'd never acted like that before. In fact, back then, she was still struggling with the warm feeling she had for me. Every date we went on ended in bed. She and I were on the move. We'd go to my apartment or hers. What struck me most was the fact that when we ended up at her apartment, there were never any children there. Adriana said that her nephew was taken by her sister, and she sent her daughter to her mother. I was interested in listening to all her conversations because I knew nothing about her family. For some reason, she kept avoiding the subject. At first, it made me tense, but then I just decided that there were more interesting conversations in the world. But when the topic was about her family, Adriana would always turn the conversation, and Elena would throw kisses at me. At the time, I was fine with that. Sometimes she stayed overnight. And this time, I especially loved, because she always got up before me to make breakfast. And it didn't matter if it was a weekend or a weekday. Most often on such days, I woke up to the ineffable aroma of freshly roasted coffee or her signature airplane. After we ate breakfast, I would get ready for work, tossing in home repairs along the way. Out of habit, I still peered through her windows the same way I did the first time. To be honest, I really wanted to see the kids there. It was a very sweet picture. When I was young, I often dreamed of having a son and a daughter. But things turned out differently. Perhaps my child is out there somewhere, but his mother has chosen to keep quiet about it. If that is the case, I do not judge this woman, because she probably does not know whose child it is. As it happens, the girls I chose were not characterized by any dignity or discretion. I spent the entire workday in torture. At some point, I was ready to take a vacation at my own expense to spend as much time as possible with my beloved. True, I was on my way to my boss to write a request, but halfway there I remembered that Adriana is not unemployed, nor can she carelessly take a vacation because she has the responsibility of her chain of pharmacies on her shoulders. I never thought that my lover would be a woman who has created such a cool business in our city. Most of all, I was surprised by the fact that she had a masterful understanding of all the drugs. She could explain what to take to get rid of any symptom, but she had no environmental or medical background. I think people like that are gifted. I asked her how she was able to gain so much useful knowledge in her business. The answer was simple. I'm just very inquisitive. Gosh, I am also very inquisitive. However, all my knowledge boils down to my profession only. I have never understood how people can simultaneously study in different faculties, have good grades, and yet not pay bribes. Apparently, Adriana was one of them. Most often after work, she and I would meet and go to some restaurant or cafe to have dinner. But what I loved the most were those moments when she invited me to her house and cooked food with her own hands. Would you know how great of a cook she is? I'm sure her dishes could be on par with some famous chefs, and everything seemed to be going well with us. But there was only one thing that bothered me the most. Somehow, since the day I met her, I'd never seen her daughter or her nephew again. It seemed to me as if she were hiding them from me. I tried to speculate as to why this might be so. However, I could not find a single adequate explanation for her behavior. I had done nothing wrong. On the contrary, I was always interested in how the children were doing, what hobbies they had, what successes they had in their studies. Adriana always responded to my questions in a curt manner and changed the subject. And when I returned to talk about the children, she began to get nervous, although she tried to hide it in every possible way. I began to reassure myself that sooner or later we would start spending time together with the children, because I was sure that we are waiting for a long and happy life together. At some point, we decided to spend a weekend together. I suggested to Adriana that we try living together. She was a little scared when she heard my proposal, but I woke up in time and realized I had said the wrong thing. At that point, all I meant was to spend Saturday and Sunday 24/7 together. It was important to me. That's when I thought I could spend as much time as possible with her daughter. And if I was lucky, my nephew would also come to visit his aunt. Adriana agreed, and I chose the place myself. I didn't want it to be one of our apartments. I wanted this weekend to be something special. I chose an incredibly beautiful chalet by the river. The location was really very picturesque. The landscape designer of the vacation base had tried hard. The owners of the site kept and bred their peacock swans. In a separate paddock were horses, which you could pet. Unless, of course, you were afraid they would bite you. For some unknown reason, Adriana said that she would get to her destination on her own. This surprised me a little. However, I did not resist, as she had every right to do as she saw fit. I arrived at the recreation center a little early to ignite the brazier, prepare the meat and shampoo. My companion turned out to be very punctual, was not late for a single minute. The territory was full of vegetation. Therefore, when in the gap I saw the silhouette of Adriana, I stood with bated breath and waited for the children to appear. However, there were none. "Honey, are you so punctual?" "Hello. You know, I expected to see you in slightly different company. Actually, I was expecting to see you in company at all. Where did you put Charles and Betty? Somehow I was sure they'd be with you." "Hello, my good man. To be honest, I thought the children were coming with me too. However, Charles is being picked up by his mom, and Betty threw a tantrum. She said she wanted to go to Grandma's. I didn't try to talk her out of it, because she wouldn't have let us spend the weekend in peace. Of course, I was a little upset. However, now you and I can do whatever we want for 2 days, if you know what I mean." Adriana said the last phrase with a smile that made my heart beat faster. "Of course, I would like to spend these 2 days in bed with you. However, if we have a marathon like this, the first day of work will seem like hard labor. I'm sure that after such fitness, there won't be a single muscle left in the body that wouldn't whimper with pain and the slightest strain." At this point, Adriana burst into laughter. I had been allowing myself more and more of these kinds of jokes lately because they amused my woman. To be honest, I also liked them because I could say what I was thinking, immediately translating it into humor. The first day has passed. Ours was simply delightful. The sun was shining, there was a light breeze. We bathed in the river, sunbathed, ate delicious kebab, fresh vegetables. But the way we spent the night, I think, do not need to explain. In the morning, we woke up not from the fact that the pleasant sun rays hit us in the windows, but from the fact that a crazy downpour was drumming on the roof. Outside the window, thunder and lightning was shining. We hoped that such a mind-blowing spectacle would end soon. However, 2 o'clock later, everything was still as it was. We decided that we should leave back to the city, as the access to the recreation center was not paved with asphalt. The road was unpaved, which meant that with each passing hour the chances that we would not be able to leave increased. After quickly packing everything up, we jumped in my car and drove into town. There it was decided that we would stop at Adriana's house. However, just as we started pulling up to her driveway, her phone rang, and after a short conversation, she said that she needed to leave for work for a few hours. I was upset, but I decided that during her absence, I would have time to make dinner and clean up. I drove my lover to her place of work, and I went to her apartment. When I crossed the threshold of her house, I immediately realized that the children were not here. For a long time, the apartment had been cleaned. Everything sparkled with cleanliness, such houses. As a rule, children do not live here. The first thing I did was to take a shower. I was there no more than 20 minutes. When I got out, I noticed someone was in the apartment. I carefully made my way across the room to the kitchen. The refrigerator was open behind a door. I couldn't see who was in there. However, I determined from the lower body that it was a woman. I didn't understand. "Uncle, who are you?" roughly inquired the guest. "You know, madam, I have the same question for you. Who are you? What are you doing here?" "Uncle, hello, this is my house. I don't remember bringing a handsome man like you here. But first of all, my name is David. Secondly, as I recall, this is Adriana's house. Of course you look a little like her, but you're not Anna. Of course I'm not Adriana. That woman whose name you mentioned, a lot of people called her my mother, but I wouldn't want her to think of herself as such." Gradually, the woman's tone began to loosen with each second. Her speech became more literate and sweet. She no longer seemed like the rude woman who stuck out from behind the refrigerator and tried to figure out who I was. She was a slender brunette with gorgeous clean hair. I wouldn't say her figure was slender. However, she was very appetizing. I caught myself thinking that I found this woman quite attractive. The fact that she called her mother threw me off. As far as I knew, my lover had only one daughter who had recently turned 4. The woman standing in front of me was at least 20. I could not believe that Adriana had kept from me the fact that she had another daughter. "So I didn't realize who you were. And when will my relative come home?" in a stern voice, the stranger asked. "Adriana and I are dating. She's been called into work for a few hours. I think she should be back by 3. Would you mind telling me your name so I'll at least know how to address you?" "Oh yeah, that's not very nice of me. My name is Kathy. It's very nice to meet you, Kathy. I'm sorry to ask you this, but I'm really curious. Are you really Adriana's daughter?" "David, I see my mother has told me absolutely nothing about me." "Yes, that's so like her. For some reason, she always preferred to conceal my existence to her new acquaintances. Have you ever noticed that Adriana is a rather strange woman? You know, at one time I had a wild desire to show her to some psychiatrist or psychotherapist to assess her real adequacy. In part, I was a little relieved. I could finally get to know my favorite woman's family at least a little bit. Kathy seemed like a very pleasant, special person, despite the harsh language in her vocabulary. When I looked closer, I realized she looked a lot like her mother, practically a copy of her. The only thing missing was the loneliness on some parts of her body. Looking at her, I realized that Adriana had no shortage of admirers when she was young. "What are you doing here?" There was a shout. I turned around and saw my woman. Adriana's eyes were huge with surprise. One could guess that she didn't expect to see her daughter at home at all. "Mommy, hello. It's been a long time. How have I missed you?" Kathy clearly lacked acting talent, as her sarcastic grin made it clear that she was lying. "Stop putting on a show in my house. Why did you come here? Finish your business and get the hell out." "Adriana, why would you do that? I didn't realize you had a grown daughter who looks just like you. It's so beautiful. Let's all have tea together. If you want, I'll go and get Betty and everyone will be together." "David, have you met my daughter yet?" Kathy said with surprise. "Shut your mouth. Shut your fucking mouth. How dare you open it? Who the hell are you? Pack up and get out of here," shouted Adriana. Her scream was so exhausting that it made me feel scared for everyone around me. I thanked God that we didn't have the children with us right now. They wouldn't have been able to bear all that was going on right now. I tried to stay calm. However, one question did not want to leave my mind. What is this? Betty, Kathy's daughter. But then why was Adriana talking about it being her daughter? What the hell is going on here? I can't stand the sound of women screaming since I was young. I'm constantly at a loss, not knowing what to say. While Adriana was screaming at Kathy, I started sobbing. I didn't know who to comfort. I tried to insert my own nonsense, but Adriana just kept screaming. I tried to raise my voice so she could hear me, but all my efforts were in vain. This went on for about 10 minutes until Kathy left the apartment. She was in such a hurry that she didn't bother to educate herself. She picked up her sneakers and ran out. Adriana yelled after her, saying she didn't understand why God had given her such a disgusting daughter. For what sins? At first I rushed towards my beloved, but she pushed me away, shouting. Her claims were unfounded. Adriana claimed I let Kathy into the apartment, but that wasn't true. The girl must have had keys because she was inside. While I was showering, Adriana was angry, not ready to dialogue, and my mind was still reeling with thoughts that Betty was not her daughter. To get some answers, I rushed after Kathy. I realized I probably wouldn't find her because it had been so long. She could have gone anywhere. But I decided to try and catch up with her. You running out of the entrance, I stopped. I had to decide which way Kathy ran. I wasn't the lucky type, so I had no hope at all of catching up with her. If you ran to the right, you could get onto a busy road with public transportation. If you go left, you can go into a quiet, cozy park. Just then, it seemed to me that a park or a public garden would be the perfect place to calm Kathy down, as the girl looked very saddened. It was unlikely that in such a state she would head anywhere on public transportation. The choice was made. I ran to the square. In 5 minutes I was there. There were not many people, as the weather was not very good. It was raining from time to time, but in the distance I could see several female silhouettes sitting on benches. I decided that one of them must definitely be Kathy. So as not to startle anyone, I began to walk down the alley at a measured pace. I was right. Near the beginning of the park, Kathy was sitting on a bench, crying quietly. I stopped a few meters away from her because I was trying to find the right words in my head to help her calm down. But the problem was that I didn't realize what words would have that effect. After all, I didn't know what was going on between her and her mother. And if Adriana didn't say anything about what was going on, then Kathy had to tell me everything. If I decided that I was going to be part of this family, then they should have no secrets from me. Kathy, God, how long have I been looking for you? To be honest, I didn't think I could catch up with you. I inhaled. At that moment, Kathy raised her head. I saw her crying. Puffy face. Tush smeared across her cheeks. I could see in her eyes that she was surprised to see me here. David, what are you doing here? Were you looking for me on purpose? Why would you want to do that? Kathy bombarded me with questions. Her facial expression radiated disbelief. I would like our relationship to be normal because I have grown to love her mother. Kathy, please don't be hostile to me. Try to understand me. I love your mother. But I had no idea she had such a grown-up daughter. I thought Betty was her child. Your screaming knocked me out of reality. If I'm going to have any chance of getting on with my life, I need to find out the truth. Please, please help me figure it out. Tell me everything I need to know. Kathy looked up at me, wiped her eyes with her hands, tears welling up and partying. She was confused. Probably didn't know where to start. The truth she told me about her mother hit me like a shoe on the head. I think the girl understood my condition, so she kept silent for a long time to find the right words. David, the only thing I can tell you is that you must get away from your mother. You have no idea what kind of person she is, what she's capable of. You don't know our history. Then I'll tell you. You may not realize it, but I'm only 20 years old. Betty is actually my daughter. A person who knows the elementary rules of math later guessed that when I gave birth to her, I was only 15 years old. I got pregnant, immediately ran to tell my mom about it. I knew it wasn't meant to be, but it just happened. There was nowhere to go. Adriana yelled at me, so the neighbors probably heard it. At first, she forced me to have an abortion. I wouldn't go along with it. We fought for days, but at some point, Adriana said she agreed with my opinion, and I would give birth. I was very happy about this turn of events, as I did not expect my mom to give up so quickly. A week later, we went to the doctor. He told me that I had some malfunctions in my body that needed to be eliminated and prescribed me a medicine. When we got home, my mom said that I would not take these pills. Replace them with herbs. I had nothing against it, as folk medicine and people use for many years. For 2 days I drank these decoctions. My condition only worsened. One day I went to visit one of the relatives on my father's line, told her about my well-being and the fact that I was drinking the decoction. When the relative found out what herbs my mother was talking to me about, she started screaming and demanded that I never drink them again in my life. As it turned out, my mother was trying to induce premature labor in me. You see, David and she didn't care about my baby, and she didn't care about me either. From that day on, I never came home again. She tried to look for me, but my aunt carefully helped to hide me. When the day of delivery came, I was taken to the hospital. Here, of course, we made a mistake. This is the only place where we give birth. Naturally, my mom was already there waiting for me. Or rather, she paid the doctors to notify her. I was admitted to the labor and delivery ward. It was a difficult labor. To be honest, I don't remember much. When I woke up, I was told that my baby had died harder, and the pain I had probably never experienced in my life. I didn't know where to go. I decided I would go to my mother. After I was discharged, I went home, but no one was waiting for me there. My mom had changed all the locks on the door. She opened the door a little and told me to get out. I, on the other hand, had been persistent in my day, and so I didn't give up and try to beg off. I could see that Mom was nervous. After a while, I heard a child screaming in our apartment. When I tried to ask who was crying, my mom just pushed me away. I flew into the wall, and she shut the door. To say I was stunned is like saying nothing. I had no idea that Adriana would turn out to be such a cruel woman who was willing to kill her granddaughter and hurt her daughter. As it turned out, the horror was yet to come. Kathy continued to narrate. I think my eyes grew wider and wider with each word she spoke. As it turned out, Adriana had bribed the doctors at the maternity hospital to tell them that her daughter Kathy had been admitted. And so they did. While the girl was in the throes of labor and her mother was already in the hospital, discussing with the doctors the scam they had pulled in the end. When Kathy woke up, she was told that the baby had been stillborn. In fact, the staff had forged documents in which the girl supposedly gave up her daughter. Apparently, the guardianship and custody authorities were also involved, as the girl was easily given to her birth grandmother, who eventually became her mother according to the documents. I just could not understand what motivated Adriana to such a disgusting act. At first, it even appeared that she initially wanted to kill this child, and then she took it away from her own daughter. I couldn't believe that I had fallen in love with such a disgusting person. After all, Adriana seemed to me to always be empathetic and merciful. At some point, I felt completely all the pain Kathy was feeling at the moment. I came to the girl, embraced her. She reciprocated. Immediately, she buried her nose in my chest and started sobbing again. I'll repeat it forever. There is nothing more horrible in the world than the tears of a woman. When Kathy calmed down, we talked some more time. I needed to get to know this person as well as possible to understand how to help her. All the while my phone was ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't want to talk to her at the time, so I didn't pick up the phone. It turned out that Kathy had just started a business a year ago. She was helping women become more beautiful. In a small amount of time, she had built up a steady base of clients who signed up a month in advance to see her for manicures, pedicures, and eyelash extensions. Not so long ago, she did all these procedures alone. But now she has a small premises with offices where specialists of the highest qualification work. I began to ask Kathy if she had tried to get her daughter back. The girl told me that for the first year and a half she had been beating on all doors, telling me that she had been deceived, that she had not given up her child. However, no one believed her. The police did not want to deal with the case as they considered it unimportant. The child welfare authorities simply closed their doors in her face because her mother had paid them generously. I realized that I could probably help legally get Kathy her daughter Betty back. However, I began to think through all of my options. The fact of the matter is that I believe that Adriana unjustifiably deprived her daughter of her child. In fact, Kathy has done nothing wrong other than getting pregnant at 15. Kathy, please calm down. I believe you have been treated unfairly, to say the least. And I promise I'll help you if things work out. You'll be embracing your own daughter tonight. David, but how are you going to do that? It's impossible. She'll never let me see her in my life. You realize I only saw my daughter when I was peeping at them. I couldn't get any closer and I watched all the time at a distance of 5-7 meters. If Adriana noticed me, she would immediately grab Betty and run away. One day I tried to go up after her, but she started screaming, calling the police. People around me started looking at me, grabbing their kids. For some reason, everyone thought I was trying to steal the baby. I just wanted to be with my daughter, who was mine, not this grown woman who was called my mother. At that moment, Adriana called again. Like last time, I had no intention of picking up the phone, however. I realized that this was the only opportunity to return the child to his real mother's. When I answered the phone, Adriana bombarded me with hundreds of questions. Mostly she wanted to know why I ran away. What am I doing now? Why didn't I pick up the phone? I tried to explain that everything that was happening had stirred up a storm of emotions in me that I couldn't control. In addition, I decided that she needed to feel guilty. So I mentioned that I was offended by her rash actions and secrecy. Adriana began to tell me that it was all a very complicated story. She was ashamed to admit everything. After that, the woman began to tell her version of events. Her story was that Kathy robbed a store when she was 15 and got pregnant by some criminal mastermind. She knew nothing about her pregnancy at all. She was confronted just a week before she gave birth. The whole time the investigation was going on. When Kathy gave birth, she was sentenced to 5 years. Because of that, the girl had to give up the baby, and Adriana decided to take on the burden. So what you're saying is that Kathy spent those 4 years in prison. Am I understanding this correctly? I asked her mother that question in front of Kathy. Yeah, that's nice. And that's just the way it was. In all those years, she never once thought of her daughter. How could I trust her? This little miracle. I mean, she's gonna go back downhill. Nobody goes back to normal after prison. I saw real rage on Kathy's face. She was ready to explode. I tried with all my might to show her to keep quiet. The belt couldn't be aware of the fact that it was just the two of us now. If the girl made a single sound that Adriana's ears would pick up, my plan would fail. The girl was holding on from the last of her strength. Adriana tried to make peace with me. I told her that I could only meet her if she took Betty with her. She agreed. She said that as soon as she picked up the girl from the babysitter, she would call me right back. Right after that, I started telling Kathy about the plan that had been stuck in my head. I assured her that if everything went smoothly, she would have a daughter sitting in her arms in just a few hours. The girl had nowhere to go, so she agreed with everything I told her. Half an hour later, I received a call from Adriana saying that she had picked up Betty and was now ready to meet me. I set up a meeting at the park. I was now with Kathy. For about 20 minutes, the girl and I discussed where she would be. I gave her the keys to my car, which I had moved closer to the park entrance. When Adriana called, I left Kathy and went to meet my favorite girls. Adriana had a frustrated look on her face. However, the cheerful and upbeat Betty lifted my spirits a little. The girl was happily running towards me. I was surprised by this, as she had only seen me once in her life. However, according to Adriana, the little girl kept asking about me. Of course, I was very flattered by this. As soon as Adriana came closer to me, she immediately started making excuses and telling again her whole story, which of course I did not believe. I tried to make it look like I believed every word she said and asked questions. What surprised me the most was the fact that Betty knew that Adriana was not her real mother. She knew there was some Kathy girl who had given birth to her, abandoned her, then moved far away. I can probably understand why Adriana told her everything about the baby girl, because as she gets older, she will start to realize that Adriana is old enough to be her mother. About 15 minutes later, Adriana's car key fob started beeping. The sound of an alarm was heard from afar. The woman was very frightened that someone might have hit her because she had parked in the wrong place. That was a good thing for me. To be honest, I thought we'd have a longer chat with her. However, Kathy didn't hesitate and went straight to the other entrance where her mother's car was parked to make her yell. I told Adriana that I had no problem staying with Betty for a while the woman went to the car and made sure she was okay. She thanked me and immediately darted off in the direction of the unauthorized parking lot. As soon as Adriana was out of sight, I picked Betty up in my arms and ran the other way. All along the road, I prayed to God that Kathy would make it back to my car in that short time. Surprisingly, the little girl wasn't scared. She took it all as a game, and I tried to joke with her along the way so as not to make people suspicious. Out of the park, Kathy showed up from around the corner, unlocking my car as she walked. I opened the back door, put Betty in it, and jumped behind the wheel myself. Kathy ran over and got in the back seat too and gave me the keys. I started the car and we drove off to wherever the hell we were going. I didn't really know where we were going because now I'm a real criminal, but I'm only a criminal under the law. What was more important to me was the reunion between mother and daughter. All along the way, Kathy hugged Betty and sobbed so bitterly. It was as if what had happened to her 4 years ago had just recently happened to her. 10 minutes later, my phone started ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't pick up the phone because I just didn't know what to say to her. I was bitter because I had loved her with all my heart, and she wasn't the person she claimed to be. When Kathy calmed down a little, she began to thank me. The words of her gratitude felt warm in my heart. At that moment, I thought that something could have worked out between us. After a little chatting with the girl, I decided that we would all go into hiding together. I decided that we need to go to my grandmother's house, which was located in 1,500 kilometers from my home. I inherited it, but I had never been there. All along the road, I sincerely hoped that the house was in good condition. It was in a remote village with only about 20 houses, but that didn't scare me. The main thing was that there would be internet, and I would be able to work remotely. Perhaps Adriana will have a conscience, and she will not go to the police and guardianship authorities. If she does, and we are found, then I will spend all my savings on the best lawyer I can find to help sort out this convoluted story. In the meantime, I will just hope that I have a happy and carefree life ahead of me, and Kathy and her beautiful daughter will be part of my family.